Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Naruto returns with a harem Harry Potter. Before I start, please support for more amazing content and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by Pax Humana and link in description and support writer. Let's start the video. Chapter 1 First Impressions. People will often tell you that first impressions are important. They will also tell you don't judge a book by its cover, implying that these same first impressions can be deceptive. A contradiction, one might think, and yet, both can be right at once. It's one of those meetings that meant so much for their worlds. Naruto looked up as one by one his wives stepped into the chamber, dressed for battle. They had said all their goodbyes to their children, friends and allies, made arrangements so that the transition would be as painless as it could be when his mother and father took over the alliance for however long they would be gone from the elemental nations. Now, it was time. They had spent the years well, he thought, over 50 years since the chaos that washed over their world as the Kitsune clan at last left the time loops. They had hunted down Akatsuki and wiped out all resistance from sound, they had left their mark on the landscape, literally in many cases, and certainly politically across the world. Now, while their bodies were still young thanks to the Kyuubi's gift, they had grown restless, looking for adventure, wanderlust growing more urgent. It was Hinata, his first love, who had idly suggested they look into the basis of their technology. When the others pointed out that they still had no idea how it worked, they just summoned it in from other worlds. She asked the next logical question, why don't we go there and ask them? Naturally, it was impossible, but that just meant that no one had done it yet, and that meant they had something to research, finding or inventing a seal that would transport them to one of the worlds that made the radios they still used only sparingly, since they had tried inventing a summoning technique for the books and only succeeded in receiving texts that were too technical for them. The writers made assumptions of their readers' prior understanding that, in their world likely were not a big deal, but for the Kitsune clan, it blocked all further progress. At last, their clones had found a destination that was just right. No strange dust clouds day and night, air was good, and while it rained a lot and a bit on the cool side, well, they'd certainly dealt with worse. Are we all ready? Once we step through, we're committed. Naruto announced. A firm chorus of affirmatives was his reply. Naruto's clones took the lead through the portal, diving in and establishing a perimeter, before Naruto himself, then his wives, and a rearguard of clones bringing up the rear, just as the portal closed behind them, now that the chakra sustaining it drained away. His earlier thoughts about the rain seemed to be prophetic as he took in his surroundings. The portal had brought them to an uninhabited area, not a soul in sight, though he did note the regular borders to the otherwise open fields in the distance. Well, this sure looks like a boring world. Naruto reflected to himself 7 weeks later that yet again, first impressions were both right and wrong. Yes, there were few people in the valley where they arrived, but the world teemed with them, even this small island nation had tens of millions of people, most in cities larger than they had dreamed possible. Yes, the world they lived in looked rather boring, but there were so many things around that were new to them, starting with their means of transport. These cars and planes were fascinating, the latter of which he recognized from that book on flying he'd found during the loops. Cars though, they were fun. He had even gotten to drive one on a quiet country road reaching nearly 60 miles per hour, clones on the lookout, so none of these police would notice. It was such a shock moving so fast and so easily. The police and general regulation of this country, England, were also a shock, and he was still ambivalent about them. On the one hand, they did keep things peaceful enough, but he was enough of a ninja and a free soul that they unsettled him at a basic level. He and his wives had forged various papers to create new identities, something he was glad they already had experience doing, as the sheer number of documents, not to mention the number of places these documents needed to be filed, created another headache for the clan. In addition, they had to choose new names, since their old ones would be sure to draw extra attention, especially as this country didn't recognize polygamy, so they couldn't even all share the same new name. Naruto Toddy said quietly to himself, well, it could be worse, we got Todds, Foxes and Hunters. We ended up deciding to keep our first names, as unusual as they are, as a lot of the time we'll only be giving those out to friends, and friends won't care. Thanks to Naruto's crafting techniques they were able to make and sell various trinkets, clothes and other items to make a nice little sum of money for themselves, enough to buy this plot of land on the outskirts of a town in Surrey and to cloak their construction of the house they built themselves. While they were not too sure they would stay here, it was a nice area, quiet, and allowed them to stay under the radar while they got their bearings. One of the best things about the time loops was that it helped cure them of impatience. They could spend as long as they needed learning the new fields, as long as they took it slow rather than get discovered. That would get messy, they were sure, if the government found people with their abilities, they didn't want to be lab rats, cannon fodder, on the run from or even at war with Britain. Far better and easier to take their time and look around. Speaking of looking around, it was time for another of Naruto's walks through the town. Tonight was Hinata's turn on his arm, while the rest of the wives stayed on their property, working on the buildings they were putting up or weaving or simply snuggling with a Naruto in front of an open fire. He took her hand and kissed it, then opened the door for Hinata, keeping an arm around her waist as they headed down the street. He was quickly aware of the small child running, and a brief glance at Hinata showed she was too, and he nodded back, guiding their course into his path. If only this is the exuberance of a kid enjoying the snow, great, but I don't think we'll be that lucky. Those footsteps, the heavy breathing, those are the signs of someone running in panic, and I never could let that go. Harry Potter's day had been, simply put, a rollercoaster ride. It started with the usual screeching from his Aunt Petunia to get up, breaking him out of a nightmare about a flash of green light. Then it was time to get up, get yelled at more while he did a long list of chores, yelled at again for being dirty, like, I could help that after she made me weed the garden again, he had grumbled to himself. Then it was off to school without breakfast because he was too slow. He considered himself lucky that he could eat in peace at the school most of the time, eating up whatever items he had snuck out of the kitchen on top of the school-provided lunch, as long as his cousin Dudley didn't steal or ruin it first. He was understandably nervous when the report cards were handed out. Despite his best efforts, he had no friends at school since, again, Dudley was all too happy to ruin that too, chasing away anyone who would talk to the smallest child in the school. However, Harry was cautiously happy about the rest of his report. He had tried his best in class and kept out of trouble, unlike Dudley who had been pulled up for bullying and whose classwork was at best mediocre. He was always mindful of Uncle Vernon's threats about what would happen if he did poorly or brought shame on the family with his freakish ways. With that to look forward to, Harry gave his best and placed first in the class. There was even the prospect of being promoted ahead of his peers, something to make his aunt and uncle proud of him at last. Only, he was wrong. They were far from proud, in fact, they were furious, blaming Harry for Dudley's own poor performance and unruly behavior. Vernon even got out the belt that Harry had long dreaded, and unlike previous times, Aunt Petunia was so caught up in Dudley's tantrum that she remained silent when Vernon raised it against Harry, bringing it down again and again on his naked back. Harry had fought back the tears, but they escaped before Uncle Vernon finished whipping him, his meaty arm tired. Harry finally wriggled free and bolted out the door, his only thought to head anywhere but here as he dashed for freedom. He rounded another corner and bounced off the legs of the blond man and fell back onto the grass, winded but uninjured, and looked way up at them. Their faces were still kind and warm even when gazing on a freak like him. They crouched down and the man held out a hand to help him up. Harry was confused why he felt so little fear of them. They were adults, after all, and so far only the school nurse and librarian had tried to help him, but there it was, he trusted them, in the instant way of a more normal child. He took the hand and stood up with their help. "I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean to run into you, I'm so very sorry," he rambled in his panic, desperate for them to believe him, for anyone to believe him really. "Shhh, little boy, it's okay. What's your name?" The woman's voice, so kind, stopped his rambling in its tracks, and he blinked, confused, before her question penetrated. "It's Freer, Harry, ma'am, Harry Potter." The adults exchanged a quick glance, then the man nodded. "I'm Hinata, and this is Naruto, Harry. Would you like to come home with us and warm up? You look so cold in those clothes, and we do want to help you." The woman's voice again seemed to fill his world, and he nodded blankly, holding their hands and walking between them on the road out of town, down towards where he had heard there was a new house, lights blazing in welcome as they approached. Once he got inside, they guided him to a couch in front of a big fireplace, occupied by a hot fire, and gave him a hot chocolate, getting him to sip it, rather than gulp, as they had seen how thin he was, and it called to their minds memories of starving children from poor villages. They waited, and soon enough Harry's tummy rumbled, giving them the excuse to feed him up. But the excuse that they had made too much, Harry agreed to accept the meal, enjoying a quiet and tasty dinner with people who made him feel welcome. Minutes after he finished the last bite, he felt his exhaustion at last, the adrenaline of his run now demanding its price, and Harry was guided through various corridors to a big room with an enormous bed, almost as large as the one his aunt and uncle had. Despite his half-hearted and three-quarters asleep protests, he was tucked into bed and was asleep moments later. Out in the dining room, the clan gathered in a meeting that contained more anger than even the Dursley household had ever seen. They had kept their emotions in check around poor Harry, but now they could finally release those barriers. How could they? You saw the marks on him. And I've checked, he's far too small for his age, not surprising considering how thin he is. I bet those bastards didn't bother to feed him enough, let alone make sure he was eating the right foods. Tsunade ranted, aware even in her rage that the others were agreeing with her, rather than objecting in any way. This was fortunate, as even after decades, her temper was volcanic and an eruption here could be disastrous. Plus, there's the way he gave his name. He was going to answer with something else at first, like his own name isn't what he was used to. With everything else, I'm worried that it was something cruel. Hinata added, pacing in her anger. Enko added her own thoughts. Much as we'd all like nothing better than to rip apart whoever did this to him, we have to look at more than just that. If we did that, there would be an investigation, and we can't be certain we'd survive it without something going wrong. Besides, as satisfying as it would be to use them as punching bags, it doesn't do what we want most. Giving that child a better life takes a higher priority. I know we've only just arrived here, but what does everyone think about taking Harry in and raising him ourselves? Surely we could do a better job than those animals. There was a moment of silence at this. It was well known by the clan that Anko was one of the more bloodthirsty among them. For her to be recommending against a little payback was shocking enough to get them thinking again, rather than just emoting. Upon a little thought, they saw the wisdom in this. The boy needed rescuing, and no one else was stepping up to do the job. Well, this is what ninjas were for, doing the jobs that others were unable or unwilling to. Besides, the kid's pain called out to their parenting instincts, and he was obviously a good kid, polite to them even when they were strangers. He was worming his way into their hearts just by being himself. Naruto looked around, taking the mood of those gathered and nodded. Okay, so we'll take him in if we can. That's the mission, now how do we go about it? He leaned back, letting the others start brainstorming how they wanted to do this, talking long into the night as they made, adjusted and discarded various plans. Harry woke up slowly. Unlike his normal mornings, there was no Aunt Petunia screeching or banging on his cupboard door, no having to huddle closer to his thin moth-eaten blanket for warmth, no pangs of hunger, only a luxurious sense of contentment as he gently awakened, gaining awareness, a comfortable sensation that fled as he woke up fully in a strange bed in a strange room, his clothes cleaned and mended and lying on a chair beside him. That's when the memories from last night flooded him, the report card, the belt, the running, the snow, the kind strangers taking him in and, wonder of wonders, feeding him. Still, now he was worried, afraid that it would all go wrong. He had never had something go right for as long as he could remember. He took a deep breath and got out of bed, dressing in silence, and stepped out into the corridor, finding a bathroom and washing up, before taking a vaguely remembered route to the kitchen, where he saw nearly 24 people sitting or standing around the table where breakfast was laid out. Despite himself, his mouth watered and tummy growled and he blushed, trying to turn away before anyone saw him. His efforts were for naught. That kind woman from last night was behind him, smiling softly at him and encouraging him to head to the table. Come on, Harry, doesn't it smell good? He had to nod at such an obvious question. It smells great. Oops, I mean, yes, ma'am, it does smell good, thank you. Call me Hinata please, Harry. She held his hand and helped him into a seat. He ducked his head and nodded, then looked at his plate. It was more food than he had ever been given, even more than last night, and everything looked delicious, even if he failed to recognize what some of the dishes even were. He looked up in surprise some time later. I finished it all. He said slowly, not totally believing it himself. Yes, you did, Harry, would you like some more? Oh, and I'm Naruto. If you like we can have the rest of the introductions when you've finished. There's plenty more if you're still hungry. Wow, he ducked his head and managed to eat another small serving before having to give up, pushing his plate away and thanking them for the food. Hinata came back and again offered a hand, then took him around to meet everyone. So many names, but they smiled and said they were sure he would learn them all before he knew it. He was a touch confused at this. Why would he get the chance? Still, he would never turn them down, they were so nice to him, maybe they would be his friends. He sure hoped so. Hinata and a few of the others led him to another room filled with toys, sitting down so you don't have to strain your neck looking up they told him, and smiling as he played with them, shy and careful as can be at first, then loosening up as time went by. He had so much fun, he was shocked when he was asked if he wanted lunch yet. He nodded, then shyly brought up his relatives. If I don't get home soon, I'll never catch up on my chores, then they'll lock me in my room again. His pause at the word room would probably have gone unnoticed in another setting, but here it merely confirmed the ladies' impressions. They nodded imperceptibly, glad the clan was already at work to rescue Harry. Naruto walked up the short path to the door of the house. All the houses here were so uniform, it was almost surreal. He had already caught himself twice trying to dispel an illusion, even though he knew there was none here. It was just an ordinary Saturday morning before Christmas, and all the ordinary families living in the ordinary street had their decorations up. Naruto rang the bell, Hinata at his side, and using what he called her royal Hyuga mode. The angry voices inside the house cut off as if with a switch, and a thin, long-necked woman answered the door. Yes? What do you want? She asked snappishly, and Naruto bit back his natural reaction to her confrontational attitude, hands carefully not approaching any of his hidden weapons. Good morning, ma'am, my wife and I would like to come in and discuss some matters, if you'd be so kind. While his words were polite enough, his bearing and tone conveyed clearly that this was not a request. Petunia flushed slightly in anger before allowing them inside, closing the door before turning on them. "And just what is it you would like to discuss, I ask you?" Naruto and Hinata effortlessly guided Petunia to the living room, Hinata subtly putting up some silencing seals before they took seats, their hosts again flushing at the insult but somehow unable to voice it just yet. "We want to discuss what it will take to ensure that Harry will leave your house and live with us." As expected, Vernon exploded at that. "And what would you want with a freak like him? That no good." For all their prior planning, they hadn't counted on just how much anger they'd feel at this point, and their killing intent flooded the room. Only for an instant, but that was more than enough time to shut up Vernon completely. He looked like he was on the edge of a heart attack, in Naruto's expert opinion. "Now, let's talk this out calmly, shall we? We want to take him in, and it seems obvious enough you want to get rid of him. Surely we can come to an arrangement that we can all live with. So much better than an arrangement that you can't live with, yes?" Naruto smiled coldly. Vernon and Petunia nodded quickly at that, and now that the initial dominance play was out of the way, Vernon finally engaged his brain, the same one that won him his high position at Grunnings, despite his less than stellar personality, and got down to business, negotiating with the couple. In exchange for various concessions, not the least of which were continued breathing privileges for him and his wife, they agreed to aid the young couple's efforts to adopt Harry and to allow Harry to live with them, taking with him the garbage that is, the heirlooms that belonged to his dearly departed mother, along with any other items that were his. As part of the deal, they would have nothing more to do with Harry than was needed for helping the transfer of legal guardianship and encourage their son Dudley to avoid Harry entirely. They would also have certain secrets kept that way with the aid of the young couple, so long as they lived by their end of the deal. While they didn't get any money for their troubles as Vernon had attempted, they consoled themselves at least they could live with this. They would be well rid of the freak. When Harry went to lunch, he was assured by Hinata and the others that, "No, your relatives won't be angry with you." He was doubtful, but his empty stomach was protesting, and already he knew better than to turn down free food when it was offered, so he went along without much fuss. At the table he was surrounded by welcoming faces, and once he finished a small plate, before he could be excused, Naruto asked him to stay there as they had some news to discuss. "You see, Harry, we have a question for you. We paid a visit to your relatives this morning and found some common ground between us. We want you to come live with us if you want to. What do you think?" Hinata asked gently, trying despite her emotions to keep from forcing him to answer the way she wanted. She needn't have worried, because after Harry pinched himself, he broke out into the biggest smile they had yet seen from the boy and launched himself at her, latching on with surprising strength. Harry settled into his new life and new family fairly well, though not without incident. He broke a glass and had to be pulled away from picking up the pieces. His flinch told the kitsunes more than enough about what he expected from their touch, and they had to go more gently, easing him in and gradually getting him used to friendly touches, hugs, and other motherly signs of affection. Punishing him was even harder for the normally boisterous clan, used to giving quick but effective punishments, then being able to forget about the infraction and move on. Instead, Harry seemed always to expect an incredibly harsh punishment for each and every infraction, real or imagined, and they knew they would have to tread carefully, letting him build up his trust in them and confidence in himself before they could really visit the subject with him. They asked him what he wanted for Christmas, and his heartfelt reply nearly broke their hearts. "What more could I ask for when a loving family is all I ever wanted?" They still ended up giving him some warm winter clothing since he needed it, and his look of pure joy warmed them right through. By the time he went back to school, Harry had filled out very slightly, the regular nutritious meals doing their job and a little more towards getting him healthy, and the exercise program they started was helping him to keep the muscles he should be building rather than turning the extra food to fat. Harry didn't mind the exercise, since it was both a family event and a way to keep himself from becoming fat, which he connected with being like Vernon. Naturally, the clan zealously monitored his health and growth while doing their best to give him the illusion of privacy. The amount of care and attention he needed and deserved touched their hearts, and they soon loved him like their own son. Nearly 4 months later, Harry had grown taller and heavier, quickly approaching the norms for his age, and though he had yet to make a friend at school, due to Dudley's intimidation, he was happier and coming out of his shell a little more each day. He walked taller after he was told by his mothers that they would be moving to a new town over summer and he would get to go to a new school with new friends in the autumn. That's how he saw Naruto and the others by then, as his family, calling them his mums and dad. When April rolled around, a very old man in ridiculously out-of-date clothes walked up to the front gate. His demeanor told of his confidence, his smile and twinkling eyes designed to make his audience trust him. Unseen eyes watched his every move and dismissed his manipulations as crude and obvious, as Albus casually strolled along, as if he had not a care in the world, then his face got positively gleeful as he pressed the electric doorbell. Naruto answered the door, and the old man introduced himself. "Good afternoon, young man, I am Albus Dumbledore. May I come in?" His bearing showed his every expectation that an invitation would be forthcoming, and having no real reason yet to refuse him, Naruto showed him through to the sitting room where Hana and Yakumo were waiting, engaged in idle chatter exactly as if they'd been there for a while, rather than arriving the second Naruto allowed the stranger into the public area of their house. Naruto waved their unusual guest to a seat and took a high-backed one himself, his ladies in matching seats to either side, after introductions were concluded. "So what seems to be the matter, Mr. Dumbledore?" Albus covered his slight nod by stroking his beard, as if organizing his thoughts before speaking. "I was right," he thought to himself, "they must be muggles if they've never heard of me. Still, it wouldn't hurt to be polite. Perhaps they'll see a reason, and I'll be spared the burden of having to use magic on yet more of their kind. Ah yes, it came to my attention that you have recently taken a young boy, Harry, into your home." Naruto smiled, "Why yes, we have taken Harry in, but I wouldn't call it recent, that was months ago. Why would you bring that up now, sir?" Albus noted every word, drawing his own conclusions, as he replied, "I am simply trying to make sure of the boy's welfare, you see." Albus's eyes twinkled slightly and he continued, "Surely the child's safety is the paramount concern." Hana leaned forward, "Interesting that you should say that, sir. Whatever do you mean?" Albus inquired. "I mean that he's been living with us for 4 months without a single visit from you, sir. If Harry's safety were your paramount concern, surely you would have visited us the very day he left those people." Hana held back most of her antipathy towards any mention of the Dursleys, though anyone could hear how she felt about them. "I am a very busy man, young lady, with many responsibilities. Perhaps you should think about cutting back then, sir, if those responsibilities keep you from your paramount concern for months, or is it years, I wonder? When did you last act upon your concern for Harry? And so many demands upon your time. It can't be good to put such a strain on your body at your age. I might just surprise you, miss." Albus's eyes twinkled with mirth. I'm sorry. I am a married woman." Hana smiled and flashed her wedding ring. "Indeed, it seems today is full of surprises. For instance, I had hoped to check on Harry and return him to his family already. It was quite a surprise to me to hear he hadn't been seen at home in some time." "Ah, you seem to be operating under a misapprehension. He has been with his family, indeed he has never been happier or safer than he has been as of late. Would you show me through that I may see him myself?" Albus asked as politely as he could. "Are you calling her a liar, Mr. Dumbledore?" Naruto's bearing seemed to shift as he allowed a fraction of his emotions to show. "Not at all." Albus hurried to say, "I simply wanted to see for myself that I may confirm her words are every bit as true as I believe." "Well, I must inform you that your trip has been in vain." Hana replied with obviously false sorrow. "Harry has just finished school for the day and is, right now, being escorted by my sister home. Then it is time for his homework. His schedule is too busy right now to drop it for an unplanned visit from a stranger. I assure you, madam, that Harry will be perfectly safe with me." Albus smiled benevolently at her, one of his most practiced expressions. "You say that almost like you take him home with you, sir, and surely we couldn't allow that, he's such a lovable young child. Also, you must agree that we are providing him with a good home here and I'm sure he would be most happy to remain with his family." Ikumo took the opportunity to gesture to the warm friendly surroundings then, smiling at the reminder, and also, if truth be known, at seeing such a normally confident person flounder, especially after the hints he was dropping that he wanted to remove Harry from their home and their lives. Over his dead body. She thought privately. And with such beautiful, caring and loving women, who all look to him as a son, around to raise him, surely you can see any boy would be happy. Naruto grinned boyishly, always happy for a chance to praise the loves of his life. "I have to admit, that does go a ways towards easing my mind. Still, I would like to see the boy myself. Perhaps I could return this weekend and see him then." Naruto nodded, "Perhaps, he can be a very busy boy and I wouldn't want to raise false hopes. Why don't you give us your address and phone number and we can arrange a time later. After, naturally, you assure us that we can trust him to be safe around you. His safety was your paramount concern, was it not? You wouldn't entrust a child's safety to someone so cavalier about the responsibility that they'd allow a stranger to see him on their very first visit, would you? No, of course not. So you can see that it would be foolish in the extreme for us to allow you to meet him at this stage. In time, if you prove trustworthy, we would be happy to allow Harry to meet such a devoted person as yourself. Unfortunately, you caught us at a bad time." Naruto and his ladies rose, clearly ending the meeting. "Of course, my apologies, Mr. Todd, Mrs. Todd, Miss Todd." Albus bowed to each as he named them, then was shown the door. "Until next time, Mr. Todd." "Goodbye, Mr. Dumbledore." Albus felt their eyes on him all the way up the street and inwardly he was fuming. How had a couple of youngsters barely old enough to wed managed to outplay him, of all people? If only he had more time to ponder this, but he truly was as busy as he had claimed. Even now, he was running late for a meeting with Minister Bagnold, where he expected she would inquire yet again if he was willing to run for minister himself. He would turn her down, again, citing some responsibility to his current positions and not having the time to run the ministry as well. The truth was that he had more than enough control over the ministry through his own channels, and that holding the title was therefore not only useless to him, but would only hinder him, because he would then be officially blamed when something went wrong. He sighed deeply, his work was never done. He apparated away with a quiet pop, unaware of all the hidden watchers catching him in the act. A few clones popped, relaying the information back to the originals, memories that prompted an immediate clan meeting. The Kitsunes agreed, they had confirmation of this Headmaster Dumbledore's letters. Magic was real. The time was fast approaching to start training Harry to defend himself, and they would use any means they had to keep their boy alive. Besides, he was already one of the family, why not bring him in all the way? The meddling old man, as he was dubbed, returned a few more times over the following 2 months, being delayed and diverted each time he tried to see Harry, and oddly disappointed at the end of each visit, more at his failure, if their guess was right, than in being unable to see their son. In the end, they felt it didn't matter unless he managed to follow them to their new location. For his part, Albus was determined to look on the bright side. If these people had managed to keep him from the boy, despite use of subtle suggestion and compulsion charms, always intercepting him before he could even find the boy, then that would protect him well enough. And with them so obviously muggles, they wouldn't contaminate the boy with his fame in the wizarding world as the boy who lived. At least some of his plan was still on track. He was sure he could salvage things, after all, he was Albus Dumbledore, greatest wizard alive. Besides, the price of failure was too high to be contemplated. The entire world would be ground under the heel of a resurgent and immortal Dark Lord. No, it would never come to that, he would see to it. Harry was excited, they had just moved to their new home, a big place with a forest around it, and he was going to get to play in it, along with lots of other new activities. First, he had to have some surgery, which was scary, but his family had assured him he'd be okay, they'd done this hundreds of times, and it would make him healthier than ever. Then, he'd get to play and learn lots of new things. His family had also changed, they got brand new jobs, they said, and even hired on people from their new town to work for them. It sure was a big change, people waving at him like any other boy and even smiling on occasion. Some came up to his parents, thanking them for what they were doing, though Harry wasn't sure exactly why. Still, the people here seemed a lot friendlier than back in Little Whinging, and Harry was looking forward to making new friends. Tonight though, he had the surgery, and he didn't like needles. Strange, but his parents didn't have needles around. He smiled in relief, maybe this wouldn't be as painful as he thought. The Kitsune sat around the living room, Naruto clone snuggling with his wife's clones, the originals still holding vigil around the sleeping Harry. "We lost him." Tsunade cried, guilt openly displayed on her face. "He died tonight, heart stopped entirely, thanks to my procedure, my arrogance." "We didn't lose him." "And how exactly was it your procedure or your arrogance? Tell me that. You didn't invent the procedure, and hell, we've each performed it enough times we could do it in our sleep." "No, there was something different this time, and it looks like it's this magic that did it. I've never even heard of a scar that screamed and pulsed out black smoke. There's enough guilt here for everyone, we were all there monitoring him, and it still snuck by us. The most important thing to focus on is that we got his heart restarted and it's been behaving normally ever since." Anko soothed Tsunade, or tried to. She knew from experience that none of them would be okay for a while after such a scare, though lovely Naruto, he would be there for them every step of the way. Shizune nodded firmly at that, "Yes, and Harry's already healthier than we had any right to expect. My best guess is that the scar was poisoning him in a way, and his body has had to fight it all this time, or rather whatever was in it. Now that smoke has gone, the scar has responded nicely to standard medical chakra, and it won't be visible short of an intensive search. That's something to be thankful for, especially with how kids can react to anyone different from them. Between the Uzumaki bloodline and the removal of the obvious disfigurement, tonight has been a definite success, even if it was not up to our usual standards in surgery," she finished with a nod to Tsunade, acknowledging that there were serious problems. Hinata looked at the time. "We should head in there, let the bosses get to bed and rest while we stand watch." The Naruto holding her nodded and dispelled after standing up, before they walking into the room, they set up for Harry's recovery and started their shift. Harry woke up the following morning, feeling an odd mix of pain and weakness with a new sense of vitality. Before he'd even opened his eyes, one of his mothers was there, holding a glass of water ready for him to drink, and when he finished it he looked around him, seeing the concern and love on the faces of his family. "What happened?" he rasped, throat still sore from whatever they did. "The surgery was a complete success, giving your body more energy and vitality, but there were a couple of surprises. You're fine now, and we're going to make sure you stay that way," Anko assured him, still caressing his head protectively. "However, we think it's time to let you in on some things that we haven't told you before. You see, you are a very special boy and you have something inside you that makes you different, a gift. You have magic, Harry, and it seems while it has helped you survive while you were with those people and helped your recovery after the surgery, it also has a cost. Your magic didn't like your body being cut open and it fought back. It's fine now, but during the surgery things would shake or move for no reason, and one point you scared us with how much it hurt your body. Just remember, we still love you and you're part of the family, now more than ever." "What do you mean?" Harry had to whisper, it was too painful to talk again. "Well, the surgery was to give you another gift, one that all the family share. We call it chakra and it allows us to do things like this." Anko smiled, and then there was a ball of white something held in Anko's upraised hand. "Cool, will I be able to do that too?" His last two words were more of a breathless whisper as his voice gave out completely. "Yes, Harry, you are one of the family and we'd like to train you to learn lots of these things. That's what we meant about the new activities and lessons here. Would you like that? We can teach you all sorts of fun and cool things, even things to protect yourself, now that you have the same gift as us." Harry didn't have to think about it, he knew what he wanted and his family was going to help him get there. His smile answered for him, brightening the room, and he went back to sleep, his exhaustion catching up with him. The following days and weeks were filled with strange new activities, like Anadamum getting him to sit and do nothing, which she called meditation, Taiyamum taught him some beginner steps for playing the piano and flute, and her and Ankomum and Kinmum, giving him new toys to play with, though they watched him to make sure he didn't hurt himself on any of them. His nights included weird dreams that seemed so real. He tried to copy the cool things he did in the dreams, and they worked. He asked his parents about it, they smiled and nodded, saying this was part of his training and that they were very happy it was working and how proud they were of him for how much progress he was making. After the weird dreams had ended, which he was later told were jinjutsu or illusion techniques, they started him off on various ninja topics, some of which didn't seem like things ninja would need, like formal etiquette or the more academic things Hinadamum and Sakuramum taught him, but he always had fun with Sakuramum. The school library had been his first refuge, and books didn't care who he was, they gave the same thing to whoever read them. The only ones who didn't end up teaching him anything in particular that summer were Shizune, Tsunade, Hana, Tamari and Kurenai, taking the time just to play with him, and he always enjoyed those times. The most significant event for Harry would be when he first made a shadow clone only a week after the dreams started, which is what they called a solid copy of Harry himself. He was shocked, but it worked. From that day, they encouraged him to keep a shadow clone going as long as he could, since the clone would learn just as he would and transfer those lessons as soon as it was dispelled. At first, he and his family were confused when the clone would learn the techniques, but when Harry tried them he would feel pain, even when copying exactly what his clone had done. He kept up the training anyway, as it was fun and new and made his parents proud of him, and one afternoon, Tentenmum came rushing in and drew a weird squiggle on the back of his neck. It felt cool for a moment, but after that, he could perform the various techniques without pain from his chakra use. Harry's reward for all this was for his parents to step up the training, making it more intense, and he often crawled into bed exhausted early on, before his body adapted to the new workload. Still, he was happy, he could feel the changes inside him, he was getting stronger and faster, and thanks to the clones, he still got plenty of time to have fun. He even loved learning to cook for his family. Not only did it give him more time with his father, but he loved the smiles on everyone's faces when they ate food he prepared, finally a chance for him to make them happy. The new training in how to fight was painful at first, he kept falling when his stance was off or he was extra sloppy, but he had come to appreciate the wisdom of Yugamum, pain was an effective teacher, and he had the bruises to prove it. Ankomum and Yujitomum were also there, giving their own advice and even moving his limbs to demonstrate the movements needed. Sword fighting was cool but scary, too. Seeing Yugamum's demonstrations was awesome, but she also brought home how dangerous they could be. She told him a sword is a tool, not a toy, and one day it could save your life. I will not have you swinging one carelessly or disrespecting your tools. Take care of your tools and they will take care of you, okay? He nodded furiously, she was really scary, but soon settled down to teaching him, being much slower with this than with fist fighting, Taijutsu as she called it, explaining that the dreams did a better job teaching that so she could go faster. He also got some of the promised training into creating light like Ankomum had shown him, though he felt the way they started off was weird, including lessons that didn't make much sense at the time on chakra shape and nature, though they became more obvious as they tied that in with the various minor techniques they demonstrated for him. Lastly, there was some fuinjutsu as they called it, using chakra and ink to create fantastic effects. Initially he was dismayed with how much there was to learn before he could do anything cool, and he didn't really believe his dad's warnings about how dangerous it could be until Tentenmum took them out to the forest, letting him watch as she drew on a small bit of paper, then threw it away from her really hard, where the paper exploded. After that, well, it definitely got his interest. "You like explosions. You really are just like other boys," Anko had said, chuckling. "And quite a few girls," Naruto added with a grin. Harry blushed, relieved that his new parents didn't think him a freak, wrapping himself in their acceptance and love. It came as something of a relief when school started back. Sure, he had the worry about meeting all those new people, but at least he wouldn't have to work as hard, right? Right. If he only knew. Chapter 2: A New Life. Harry walked up to the gate of his new school, arriving early to Parkmead Primary School, Naruto and Hinata on either side, and he was sure the rest of his family were watching from somewhere to see him start his first day. He noticed the easy smiles on his parents' faces as they met up with other parents, the pride they showed when they introduced him to the other families. It made his own smile that little bit more natural, and he relaxed, even managing to offer an occasional gesture to the other kids he met. Thanks to one of the more unsung but useful parts of his ninja training, he memorized the kids' names as they were introduced, something he was told would be invaluable when he tried to make friends later. What Harry didn't know at the time was that many of the parents had told their kids to be nice to the new kid, as his parents were helping to boost the Cranley economy and seemed to be well off, so they didn't want to get on the new family's bad side. Of course, not all the kids wanted to go along with this, but it was enough to help smooth his entry to their school. On his first day, Harry introduced himself to the class, just over 30 new names. Plus their teacher, Mr. Hallett. Mr. Hallett assigned him to a seat in the second row, between two girls named Stephanie Melville and Michelle Roberts. He then started off with a quick recap of what they were taught the year before and a summary of some of the topics he expected to cover this year. He was a very tall man, and he was quick to deal with kids making too much noise, but other than that the only notable trait Harry noticed was that he could be very enthusiastic about certain topics, talking for hours about one thing or another, only to get interrupted by the bell announcing the end of class and freedom for the kids. At lunchtime, Harry talked to more of the kids, finding though that he liked the girls more than the boys so far. The boys wanted to compete and try dangerous stunts in the school playground, something that had no appeal to Harry after the summer he had spent getting his fill of cool and dangerous things. Though Harry later warmed up more to the boys in his class, he grew closest to the three girls, Michelle and Stephanie, his desk neighbors from before, and their best friend Ashley Banks, who now sat behind Harry when their teacher had changed the seating arrangement. He settled in, taking the second spot in all his classes, and was always happy to study or spend time with any of his new friends. Early in October, his teacher, Mr. Hallett, asked to come by and visit his parents. Harry smiled and said he would let them know, but was sure that he would be welcome to drop by Saturday afternoon if that was good for him. A quick confirmation later, and the appointment was set. When Mr. Hallett dropped in and was brought into the nice warm living room, fire blazing away in the fireplace, he noticed that there were quite a few adults waiting for him. His jaw dropped, despite his best efforts, when he was informed just how many women lived here. "You're one lucky man," he said softly to Naruto, who only smiled and nodded, grateful that Harry's teacher had such a restrained reaction. He didn't want to have to run damage control if the man had offended his wives. A polite request for the man's discretion was quickly granted, and they settled down to business, the teacher seeking answers to why and how Harry so consistently placed second in every test, and the parent seeking the teacher's evaluation of Harry's performance. They deflected his questions with an off-the-cuff mention of how cruel kids can be to anyone different, so they had advised Harry to be careful not to show off as that could put off his friends or hurt them if he outshone them too much. "It seems Harry took our words to heart," Naruto smiled. "He's always been a good boy, never wanted to hurt his friends. We'll have to talk with their parents, I suppose, and see how they want to handle it." "So you were aware he could do much better?" "Oh yes, we've been giving him some extra lessons at home at his request. He's even volunteered to help out with the cooking from time to time. In fact, tonight is his night to help with dinner," Hinata added. "Well, as long as he is reaching his potential and he does get to have fun, I'm glad to say I see no reason for concern," Hallett replied with an honest smile. He hadn't wanted to risk offending the family that was doing such good things for the local economy, but he had put off the check as long as his conscience could stand already. "Please do let me know if you have any concerns or questions in future about the school or about Harry's performance." "Of course." Now, would you like to stay for dinner? Harry expressed a desire to do something for the teacher who has already done so much to help him settle in and make new friends, so I know he'd be thrilled if you could stay. I do believe I'd like that, thank you very much. And the conversation drifted naturally over other topics from there, Mr. Hallett letting slip certain hints about other families without really noticing, items that the clan used to settle in better and ruffle fewer feathers. Another incident took place the following Saturday morning. Harry was out walking to meet Ashley, Michelle and Stephanie at a park on their side of town when a masked man in black robes and a pointed hat came out of nowhere, shouting something at him. There was a bright green light, a rushing sound, and a brief feeling of disorientation. When Harry opened his eyes, he saw a lifeless Naruto where he used to be, that then puffed into a cloud of chakra smoke, only a clone and not his real dad having taken his place. He looked around for the madman that had tried to hurt him, but another Naruto clone was right there in front of him, hugging him and whispering that the man had been taken back to their home to find out why. He asked Harry if he wanted to continue to his friends or return home, though if he did go home, he wouldn't get to see the man. "We're not going to risk your health around anyone like that," Naruto had told him firmly, making Harry smile. "Whichever you choose, Harry, we will be around watching everything until we can be sure that it's over." Knowing he wouldn't be able to ask any questions himself took most of the appeal out of going home, and while he wanted the comfort from his mothers, he didn't want to be around the madman. "I'll continue on, Dad, besides you have told me often enough never to keep girls waiting, right?" Naruto grinned back at his son. "Indeed, it's a good rule to live by, especially as you get older." "Thanks, Dad, I can make it from here," Harry said, knowing there was no way that Naruto or the others would actually leave him alone, but wanting that illusion for now, while he thought things over. Anko cracked her knuckles for effect as they came into the Stark room set up for questioning the prisoner. Prisoner searched and disarmed. Check. Prisoner's body secured. Check. Chakra suppressing cuffs. They probably wouldn't matter, but check. Now for the fun stuff, making sure the prisoner knew they were serious. She walked up menacingly towards the man sneering at her, whose age she estimated around mid-30s, and sank her fist into his gut, then backhanded him, coincidentally helping him straighten up and get much needed air. No point making this take longer than it had to, and she wanted answers quickly. "Now that you know I am serious and that you are in trouble, let's get this interrogation started. You want to live and I want answers. If I get what I want, we'll see about letting you have what you want. If you're very good, you may even get out of here with all your limbs intact and have a pain-free existence, so now it is time for you to convince me. What is your name?" The interrogation took a few hours, their prisoner never did give them his name, proving to be very uncooperative, so they eventually resorted to trying Yamanaka techniques. The passive listening ones weren't picking up much beyond that he thought them disgusting muggles whatever those were, and that he liked the looks of the vixens, which was only fair enough, though he felt they should be kneeling at his feet in servitude. Once they used the active techniques, they found out a few things. Firstly, mind-walking in the mind of an adult, hostile wizard was painful to both of them and damaging to the wizard's mind. Secondly, they discovered a variety of trivia about the man's life, along with the more useful items, like the existence of this hidden society, who Albus Dumbledore was in more detail than just a useless title on his letters, that Harry was famous for stopping a Dark Lord then disappearing, and that the wizard they had tied up was one of the Dark Lord's followers, a Death Eater, trying to get vengeance. Oh, there were other things too, the blood status nonsense that reminded them too much of the bloodline purges in Mizu, the school Hogwarts that Dumbledore ran, Diagon Alley and Nocturne Alley, shopping districts for the magicals, impressions of the village Hogsmeade, the hospital St. Mungo's, and so on, a lot of it jumbled together, along with names and faces of his friends, more of these bigots, and lastly, the thought that he was looking forward to meeting one of his friends after work the following evening and telling him about his hunt for the boy who lived, along with the strong impression that he would be missed and tracked if he failed to show up. Looking at the time and their drooling prisoner, now bleeding slightly from the ears and nose, they had to come up with a plan fast. They didn't know what means these wizards had to track them down, and thankfully the brain damage would keep anyone else from finding out from their prisoner directly, but they couldn't risk killing or keeping him too long, and that meant making sure he was found by his own kind before any sort of organized search set out. After some urgent discussions, it was decided to take him to St. Mungo's and leave him there. They forced some cheap scotch down his throat, splashing more on his clothes, cleaned him thoroughly of any sign of the interrogation, and secured him in the car. Naruto drove him there, keeping an eye out all the way for any more surprises, a clone making its way to the Muggle entrance and then performing a quick replacement with their prisoner, leaving him there with no remaining evidence of how he got there or with whom he had come in contact. Naruto drove away carefully, obeying all the road rules, not wanting to be pulled over and possibly linking him to the Death Eater they had left comatose outside a hospital. Harry, meanwhile, was having an interesting time of his own. The girls he went to meet ran late, and when they arrived, they just invited him back to meet a couple of their older friends, Elizabeth, who insisted on being called Ella, and Megan, to play some games. Harry went along, happy to get new friends, and found that the day was going to be supervised by a teen named Sandra Middleton. She had a nice smile for him and introduced him to Megan Best, who gave him a big smile and took him to the table. They were just serving lunch for the group, then they played a few different games. Over the afternoon, they talked and got to know each other a bit better, deciding that they would like to do it again and spend time together at school. When they called it a day, Harry thanked them for having him over and left with a wave, heading out of sight before using body flicker to get home quickly, aware that his parents would much rather that he was home, safe and sound soon. The talk they had when he got home was scary but exciting. Hearing about the new society and some of its wonders. He also found out that he would be getting some extra training, lessons in botany and fashion from Inomum, that would please his friends, and lessons in things called ethics and philosophy from Isaribimum and Kinmum that would help him stay worthy of his friends. The following years were a lot quieter overall for Harry and his family. They built up their forestry business further, extending and expanding the forest for a number of purposes. It allowed them to hire on more locals to work for them, further cementing their place as accepted and respected members of the community, provided more income, which was useful in its own right, and allowed them cover to create a version of their beloved Forest of Death for the later training of Harry. They also got involved in other local businesses, both for possible profits and to extend their revitalizing efforts. They would much rather live in a happy and prosperous area than a depressed one, after all, and what was a little hard work to them. Their joy at acquiring an interest in a slaughterhouse was restrained in public. It wouldn't do for people to find out their main reason was to put a preteen boy to work slaughtering fully grown meat animals, after all, even perhaps especially if it was great training for combat. There were laws against that sort of thing, both child labor laws and against producing the types of child soldiers their own world churned out by the thousands. Harry was happy enough to work, and they did reward him for his efforts and progress, and that was good enough for the kitsunes. Speaking of Harry, he grew and improved steadily, able to maintain a second shadow clone shortly after his 7th birthday. More than enough excuse for another party in his parents' eyes. The following day, he asked if he'd get to learn any new subjects this year, earning proud smiles. The proudest of all from Sakuramum, who had become something of a fixture at the local libraries. Borrowing books on all sorts of things new to the clan in the nearly 2 years they'd been there, from chemistry and physics to astronomy to engineering, and books she had naturally brought home for the others to read. Harry was both excited and dismayed at the list. Sure, it was great to learn all these new things, and spending more time with his mums was also a pleasure, but the length of the list was a little daunting. There was chemistry with Aemum, stealth and covert ops with Uegamum, language lessons with Kurenaimum to improve both his Japanese and English skills, as the ninja lessons were easiest in Japanese. He was also beginning other studies. Animal care with Hanamum, feeding and grooming the clan's dogs before getting to work later with the tame tigers they kept. Those tigers were awesome, all big and sleek and strong, when they weren't relaxing in their smaller cat forms where they were really cute. He was also starting biology with Hanamum, though Isaribimum would be taking the lead on that one. This was good, he didn't spend enough time with her yet. Oh, and that tied in with what Tsunade'mum and Hakumum were teaching him with first aid and something called combat anatomy, where Hakumum assured him they'd learn how the human body worked and how to take it apart. Henton-mum would be teaching him how to throw just about anything, and his mums agreed she was the best. Lastly, there was Yukuma-mum. With her he would learn how to cast Jinjutsu, those illusion techniques he'd experienced before with those dreams, as well as teaching him his civics, whatever those were. As if that wasn't enough to keep him busy, he would get to start missions where he would be putting the skills into practice. These missions went from D rank to A rank, and special ones called S rank, which were even harder than A rank ones were. All that, and he still had school and friends and, if ever found the time, sleep. He got started, and he was never more grateful to his parents than that moment when they calmed him down, assuring him they had helped lots of kids learn these things, and they would make sure it was at a pace he could handle. He was a little doubtful at first, since it was so hard, but they were right, as his parents so often were. He could do it all as long as he tried his best, so that's just what he gave. He even worked his way through the D rank missions, and impressively started his first C rank before the school year was out. Speaking of school, he was having heaps of fun there and making more friends, even if a couple of the girls were getting more giggly around him. He'd ask Inomum about it, but she just blushed a little and told him not to worry about it, he wasn't doing anything wrong. He did notice her and Sakuramum get teased a little the following day, but he didn't much care. He knew by now that friends and family can tease each other in fun without everything going wrong. He was also top of the class, and some of his time with friends was spent in study groups, where he often found himself the first to understand the topic and helping the others too, which they said was making their parents happy since it brought their marks up too. Somewhat foolishly, he was thinking he'd get to relax over the summer when he turned 8, but he didn't know there was so much more to learn. His achievement of a third concurrent shadow clone the week school ended prompted another party and more changes to his training. The earlier lessons on chakra nature became more relevant as they started him training in the 5 elements of ninjutsu or ninja techniques. Tamari Mum training him in wind, including using it to sweep areas in the forest that they prepared for him, Kin Mum training him in lightning, it was so cool to be able to feel where the electricity was in the house, Shizune Mum and Tsunade Mum took earth, Isaribi Mum would teach about water and Yujito Mum, and Anko Mum took fire. He especially liked fire. Breathing fire was awesome. They also stretched his mind further, Tamari Mum and Ayam Mum introducing him to accounting and business, and they said economics would come later. Haku guided him into the world of physics, starting with basic principles and the 6 simple machines. Levers, wheel and axle, pulleys, inclined planes, wedges and screws, along with examples of them in use. She said later these would be very useful when he made his own puppets, as well as helping him understand more of how the world around him worked. Shizune also introduced him to poisons, building on his earlier introduction to medicine and chemistry, showing him that while fireballs are fun, they aren't the only way to get the job done, and that there was another reason to be careful what he ate. Last, but by no means least, Inomum was going to teach him the fearsome Yamanaka techniques, both the mental defenses and traps, and the more insidious side, techniques to listen to thoughts, and to walk in someone's mind and sift their memories, on the condition that he doesn't abuse them, a condition that they would know if he violated. After impressing that upon him, she eased off her intensity and taught him in her usual style, with her and others offering their clones for his practice. Going back to school was again a relief, a time for the real Harry to relax in body and mind, while his clones were still charging ahead in his extracurricular activities, though now they were also spending time just playing games and enjoying themselves with his family part of the time, something Harry found he sorely needed to help deal with the workload. Again he was top of the class, and now top of their year too, and he found himself putting in work to help prevent that turning to jealousy from his classmates. Sure, he knew that it was natural enough, but it was still hard to take, and he often found himself surrounded by girls trying to get his attention. Something for which a lot of the boys pitied him, since girls were icky or something. One of his escapes from that was playing sports with the boys, and while he had to hold back his full abilities, it was both training and control and good fun. He was a little confused when his best friends who were girls anyway, started looking a little weird at each other, but he was excited they were working hard like him and showing the benefits, so he made sure to congratulate them when they did well. He loved seeing the smiles on their faces. He wasn't so happy about some of the other girls at school, who seemed to take to sighing whenever he turned up and doing stupid things to get his attention. When he told his family about that, he was surprised to see Sakura Mum turn even pinker than her hair. When he got up the courage later to ask her, she sat him on her knee and told him that when she was young, she had done some foolish things to get a boy's attention, as had lots of other girls, but she had grown up and knew better for herself. Don't worry, Harry, at least your fangirls don't follow you around armed like we did. She grinned when Harry shuddered at that, glad that she could finally laugh again about that time in her life with someone else, rather than being laughed at. Lastly, they were all proud of Harry's progress with the missions he was taking, the clan having set up areas for the purpose, and now running him through C rank and even B rank missions by the spring. The following summer Harry knew what to expect. His training expanded further, though this time there were only 2 new areas of ninja techniques, with Tsunade Mum starting to teach him medical jutsu or chakra-based healing techniques, and Hana Mum teaching her old Inuzuka clan's animalistic techniques. What Harry found he enjoyed most, though, was that he was spending more time with his dad Naruto, who was teaching him crafting skills. Blacksmithing was a passion he shared with Tenten Mum, but it was the father-son bonding over the other skills that stood out in his mind, even as he learned tailoring and leatherworking, and studied jewels and jewel crafting. He was both proud and nervous that they were letting him handle such beautiful gems, even after his dad told him the secret technique he had developed to make them from sand or dirt to ease his nerves. He had to pinch himself at that, forgetting for that moment that it would dispel his clone. The memories made the others pinch themselves too, and when he went to create the replacements, he managed to get 4 stable clones, prompting another party. Harry himself, however, decided to throw a party at the end of summer. Privately it was his happiness at getting to ease off a little. His first successful use of the chakra gathering technique was excuse enough to his parents, as it helped him increase the number of concurrent active clones, hitting 6 within a month. He was happy enough to learn and work, and he did understand why they were loading more into his summers, as they were the only time he could run the longer B and A rank missions he was up to. There just wasn't time during school term for the real Harry to disappear that long, only weekends and holidays allowed that sort of opportunity, and Harry had to admit he did like the challenge, testing himself in new ways. The lessons in Fuinjutsu, or sealing techniques, he had completed, and very quickly he finally found out. While he wasn't yet qualified to create new ones, he had managed to learn to copy all the ones he had the chakra to activate. Once back at school, Harry noticed that he and his girls, as his parents called them, were excelling in school, even taking on extra by learning French from one of the teachers in special tutoring. Harry was grateful to Sakura Mum for helping him and his friends, she had a great memory and loved to share her knowledge. He had to go back to Ino Mum for advice on how the girls were acting, he was pretty sure they were flirting with him a little, and she confirmed that they were experiencing their first crush and gave him advice on how to treat their feelings without hurting them. Something I only wish had been done for me, she confided, smiling. Harry freely admitted he was biased, but he thought his girls were at least as pretty as any others in their year. His opinion firmed up as the girls started getting their own fans, something that made him somehow proud. Life settled down for the family, almost becoming routine, only almost though, as the clan would always try to spice things up before they could get too bored or lose their edge, their situational awareness. Harry continued to lead his year group in the classroom and outside it on the football field. His girls continued to flirt, and slowly but surely, Harry learned how to flirt back, all of them having fun imitating the teens they saw. Harry was far from suave and sophisticated since he was still so young, but he was still growing to be a charming boy, and Ino's lessons in flirting and Kuroni's in seduction went nice and slowly. While the kitsune saw nothing wrong with a precocious pair of experimenters, they had spent enough time in England to understand that their attitudes were most definitely not shared by everyone. And so, they made sure that Harry didn't put the more advanced lessons into practice, something that was aided by their version of the talk at the start of his summer holidays in '90. The kitsune version was far more detailed, informative and mortifying than Harry's worst nightmares. Ino Mum's tips on flirting were embarrassing enough, though useful, as were her insights into younger minds. Her instructions on foreplay, accompanied by Kuroni Mum's seduction training, took it to the next level. Having Anko Mum and Tsunade Mum playing the part of demonstration aides, however, would stay with him forever. He took ages to be able to look at them without blushing, though he would be grateful for their help in later years, not that he'd willingly admit it. After that, Harry swore that he would stick to holding hands and hugs at most, because there was no way he was ready for that. It was something of a relief when his parents threw him into the deep end with a simulated S rank. Sure, getting stuck in mud, baked by fire techniques, near drowned by water and cut by wind blades, was many kinds of awful, but it didn't compare to the horror he felt at the prospect that his parents would give him another talk. The rest of the training was much less harrowing, and his last year at Park Mead went reasonably quietly, except for one event that brought home to Harry just how much he had changed and how much further he had to go with his training. He was walking home one evening, having just left his girls, and spotted an older boy, somewhere around 16 by his looks, pinning a girl against the wall in an alley. They were far enough down it to be out of easy sight from the street, and the girl was in some pain where the boy was gripping her shoulder. Harry's heart started pumping harder, and his breath quickened as adrenaline flooded his system in response to his rage. He hated bullies, especially boys who picked on girls. Sure, he knew girls could be just as lethal as boys, his mums proved that beyond a doubt, but it wasn't something he could train out of himself, it wasn't something he wanted to change. So when the boy reached out to slip a hand underneath her shirt, he gave in to his anger and let his training take over. There, he was right behind the target, thus, he hit pressure points, causing the target's legs to buckle. Now, he started kicking in the precise places and times that Hakumum detailed for inflicting maximum pain for minimum damage. And he blinked, restrained completely in ninja wire with the clan surrounding him, watching him, talking him out of it. How did he get here? Oh, of course, the clan brought him here because they saw what he was doing to Harry had the urge to vomit, suddenly, a reaction, he remembered, nothing to be ashamed of, they had said, but still it burned, less because of his reaction than what spawned it. He had lost his self-control, applied the lessons they taught him to cause pain. He looked up at last and saw the understanding. They talked him through the encounter, what he saw, what he did, why he did it. They added later that they had had to heal up the bully because Harry's strikes would show that there was someone with advanced training involved and none of them wanted Harry persecuted because of that. They did, however, manage to convince the bully and the girl not to spread what happened, even encouraging them to view the encounter as a weird dream, one that might just convince the boy not to go touching uninvited. Ankomum and Harry shared a grim smile at that. Harry still wasn't happy with himself for losing control, but he'd be lying if he said he didn't want exactly that outcome. One exchange in their conversation stood out for Harry. Naruto asked Harry to name an important lesson he learned from the incident. Harry thought about it for a few seconds. There is always more to learn about the world, about control, and about myself. Naruto nodded and added, and girls. He never did get all of the details, but nothing much ever came of it. The boy became slightly less of a jerk, the girl obviously just wrote it off as a nightmare, but for Harry, it was an important lesson in how seductive anger can be and how if he didn't rule his emotions, he risked them ruling him. After that incident they encouraged Harry to find healthy ways to release his stress. He sampled music of many genres, browsed through TV shows, went on walks or runs, sang and danced to any music that interested him, created or practiced appreciating art, anything he or they could think of to find what methods worked for him. When he found that a variety of harmless practical jokes worked for him, there was talk that he was a true kitsune already, and they set about developing his hobby into a skill to be proud of. When that was followed by his love of massage, several of the angels looked askance at Naruto, wondering just how many of his personality traits were transferred with his bloodline. They were somewhat relieved when his third method of relaxation turned out to be movies, as that didn't remind them of Naruto, or not too much. At last, the summer of '91 came around and Harry's parents sat him down, reminding him of the magical people in their society and how they took in children at 11 to start lessons in magic at a school called Hogwarts. In all honesty, Harry hadn't much thought about this in years, he was far too busy and having far too much fun to dwell on that. Now, though, he was wondering why they hadn't approached him yet if they expect him to go to them for next year. It was only months away. Otherwise, he was hoping to go to the same school as his best friends, learn and have fun, until it was time for him to go to work too. Harry was proud that since learning the chakra gathering technique, the number of clones he could maintain had shot up to 12, and he expected to continue increasing that as long as he got the time to train his body and mind. Uegaumum reminded him, however, that it was almost certain the magical people would come for him. That weird old man that tried to take him back to them was, after all, the headmaster for the school and seemed to want something from Harry, which presumably would be easier if Harry went to Hogwarts, and the other magicals considered Harry the famous boy who lived, which was reason enough for that masked madman to try to kill him. The idea that they wouldn't demand their hero go to their school was laughable at best. His mums and dad gave reasons why going to Hogwarts as expected would be a good idea, if only to get answers on just what was going on, as well as going over why it would be a bad idea, going off alone into unknown dangers at the top of the list. They made it clear that while they would give him advice, they would let him make the choice and stand by him. May turned into June, June turned into July, and the tension at the Kitsune home mounted steadily higher. The clan were confident in their reading of the people involved, but it was getting stupidly close to the time Harry would have to go this Hogwarts place, and still no word. With barely a week left of July, they finally got their first official contact from the wizarding world, a letter written on parchment and delivered by an owl of all things. While the clone kept it restrained, the clan read the letter, surprised by the contents. For a start, the writer assumed that Harry had access to his own trained owl to make a reply, a ridiculous assumption to make of anyone outside their own society, and the list of clothes and equipment included items totally unknown to the clan, like dragonhide gloves, or merely exceedingly strange, like plain work robes. It was quickly decided to write back to this Deputy Headmistress Minerva McGonagall. Dear Deputy Headmistress McGonagall, or to whom it may concern. We have received your letter regarding Harry Potter's acceptance to Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. If this is a joke, then it is in poor taste. We have never applied to send Harry to any such school, and indeed we have doubts that it even exists. Certainly it is not listed anywhere among the better schools, and we have no intention to send our precious son to a school where his only qualification upon completion is as some sort of entertainer. We intend to give our son the very best in life, so you can see why your school doesn't measure up, as you sent no information as to provided courses or past results, no proof, and no way for us to get this equipment even if it exists. If you intend to ensure his enrollment, you will have to provide more of an introduction than some form letter. We are available to meet to discuss the matter should you wish to convince us after all that your school is the place for our Harry. Yours sincerely, Naruto Todd. Adoptive father and legal guardian of Harry Potter, acting on his behalf. Harry approached the captive owl, and after tying the letter to its leg like the last had arrived, he tried something, feeling a little silly. Will you take this letter for me? The owl nodded. Feeling more confident now that he knew the owl seemed smart enough to understand him, he continued without the earlier unease. Would you take it to Deputy Headmistress Minerva McGonagall? Again a nod. Would you take it to Prime Minister Major? The owl shook its head, and Harry smiled, relieved that the owl passed this test. Okay, thank you, here you go. He stepped back and the clone escorted the owl to the edge of the forest before letting it go, eyes watching it until it disappeared over the horizon. Well, that's that done. Now to see if it does any good. Sakura Mum remarked to no one in particular. The next day, a tall woman appeared in the nearby park, immediately spotted by hidden clones set out to look for incoming strangers. She was wearing an old style of dress, sensible and conservative shoes, and a hat to match. Her approach to the Kitsune home was monitored every step and they didn't keep her waiting long when she rang the bell. Naruto answered the door with a polite expression. "Good morning, sir, would you happen to be Naruto Todd?" "Yes, I am. May I inquire after your name, madam?" Naruto asked politely, following their plan. First stage was designed to provoke a visit, hopefully a peaceful attempt on the school's part to convince them to allow Harry to attend, but they had planned, as best they could in the face of their ignorance, in case the response was not as friendly. They wouldn't be who they were if they didn't try to plan for the worst, which is why Harry would not be setting foot within a mile of this woman until they had some measure of her. "Of course, Mr. Todd, my name is Minerva McGonagall, Deputy Headmistress. May I come in that I may discuss the matters you raised in your letter? I confess that I would rather talk about this somewhere other than on your front doorstep where anyone may see." Naruto invited her in and led her through to the sitting room, one of their public rooms, offering her a seat and inquiring if she would like any refreshments, giving her a level of politeness they had never granted one Albus Dumbledore. Then again, that particular person had never granted them that either. Over the course of the next hour, Mistress McGonagall demonstrated more magic and answered more questions than in any 10 normal introductions to the wizarding world. Only one other in her recent memory asked more, but still, at least there she had met the prospective student she was meant to invite. Here over an hour had passed and they still hadn't produced Harry Potter. She was just about to ask when she caught the barest of nods and in walked the boy who lived at last. Naruto caught her attention again. "Thank you for answering our questions. We are now satisfied that what you call magic is, indeed, real and fully expect that the school, this Hogwarts, is likewise. In addition, the way you have behaved has inspired sufficient trust for us to allow you to meet Harry. After the way the last wizard to visit us behaved, we were reluctant to expose Harry to more of the same." Naruto appeared at least somewhat embarrassed for treating her that way. "Harry, this is Mistress McGonagall, she's the deputy headmistress we wrote to yesterday and also the professor of the Transfiguration course, wasn't it, Mistress McGonagall?" McGonagall smiled and nodded, her Scottish brogue more pronounced as her joy at seeing Harry fit and well flowed through her, putting aside her questions about the last wizard visitor. "Indeed it is, Mr. Todd, thank you. Ah, Mr. Potter, your adoptive father has had many questions for me. I have been teaching for many years now and some of them surprised me. May I expect more from you?" Her words and stern face were offset by her warm eyes and welcoming tone. Harry blushed a little at being pegged so well. "Yes, Mistress McGonagall, I do have questions. First, may I see some magic for myself? I would also like to know how you know I'm a wizard, what courses you offer, and what jobs I could get after completing my Hogwarts education. Until your letter arrived, I was expecting to attend high school with all my friends and the girls will be crushed if I don't go," he replied. Minerva smiled at this, thinking to herself that little Harry was already getting the kind of attention that most of her older male students could only dream of. It helped that he was quite the handsome boy for his age. As she performed for Harry, changing the colors of her clothes all black and back again, before transfiguring an empty chair into a cat that jumped up on Harry's lap, purring, she examined Harry closer. "Mr. Potter, I had the good fortune of teaching both your parents and I must say you remind me of both of them. You certainly have your father's black hair, though better behaved than his ever was, but also your mother's eyes and jawline." Harry smiled at this and resolved to himself to ask her more later about his parents, since he still didn't even have a photo of them, but first he had to find out if it was even worth going to Hogwarts, worth entering into a society where killing a child was something so casually attempted. "Thank you, Mistress McGonagall." Harry smiled at her. "The demonstrations were impressive, as I'm sure they were meant to be. They sure made me curious to learn more. However, are there any reasons other than missing out on some abilities why I should bother attending any magical school? I have lived my life without magic, so continuing without it wouldn't be that big a deal for me." Minerva McGonagall was surprised by young Harry as she thought of him, a condition she would find oft repeated over the years. "That's a very good question, young man. Well, I would certainly enjoy teaching you, as you have already demonstrated a keen mind. I understand that wouldn't be a compelling reason to you to attend. As it happens, though, there does exist a very good reason for training, especially for those living as you do among the Muggles, a word for those without magic. As I expect you will have noticed, most often when your emotions are strongest, your magic may escape, acting upon your intent but unformed, chaotic. As you age, your magic gets stronger, and this accidental magic as we call it grows in strength too. There are cases of young wizards and witches who have killed themselves or those around them with their accidental magic, particularly in adolescence when the emotions run even higher and new urges make their appearance. Accidental magic is a danger in another way, too, as our world remains hidden from the Muggles, protected by the International Statute of Secrecy, which exacts severe punishments upon those whose actions may expose us. Lastly, underage wizards, which is anyone under 17, may not perform magic out of school, as it is against the decree for the reasonable restriction of underage sorcery. Doesn't that mean I won't be able to show my family what I learn until I'm about to enter my last year, 6 years of tuition paid, that almost anything I do at that school would be a mystery to my family? That's hardly a sensible arrangement. Would you pay someone for 6 years with no guarantee that it's doing anything at all? Harry paused and blushed. Sorry, Mistress McGonagall, I guess it's not up to you, is it? I shouldn't blame you for something you haven't done. He added with an undertone, thinking darkly of the Dursleys. Quite alright, Mr. Potter. And there are clauses that do allow the performance of magic by those underage under certain circumstances. Firstly, magic may be performed in self-defense or defense of other wizards or witches when necessary to save a life. Secondly, magic performed by those too young for formal training is assumed to be uncontrolled magic and therefore not something that deserves punishment. Thirdly, if the child is under appropriate supervision when the magic is performed and it does not break the international statute of secrecy, demonstrations and practice are permissible if the appropriate license is obtained. Generally, a witch or wizard in good standing would not find it too difficult to get that license to supervise their child, and I believe many do. Naruto furrowed his brow at that. Forgive me, Mistress McGonagall, but doesn't that disadvantage those like our Harry who aren't raised by wizards? Well, I understand that it could be useful to have a wizard on hand to help if the student makes mistakes, and that is a good reason to handle it that way. Is any effort made to provide those raised by muggles with the opportunity to continue their studies too? A Hogwarts program, perhaps? I'm sorry to say, Mr. Todd, that we don't have a program like that. This is actually the first time I've even heard such a suggestion, which may go some way towards explaining why we don't have it, however. While I cannot say if it will ever go ahead, it would certainly get my support. Sadly, I do not have high hopes of seeing it anytime soon. What about if we organized such a group? As I said, you would certainly get my support. Minerva smiled, happy to be able to offer it. And should it happen to be that you find yourself in need of a witch for your program, it would be my honor to provide that supervision for at least some of the holidays. After all, everyone needs some time off, and this would be taking some of mine. Naruto nodded, that's fine, indeed you are offering more than we could expect. From what we've gathered today, you have a lot of duties already. We are certainly thankful for your offer and will keep it in mind. Naruto looked to Harry. Well, Harry, you've got a week to decide if you want to go. Do you have any other questions? Yes, Dad. Mistress McGonagall, are there other books or places we can get more information on things? For that matter, how do I even get my school things? Mr. Potter, for you and other Muggle-raised children, I run visits to Diagon Alley, the magical shopping district in London, where you may purchase all your school supplies and browse Flourish and Blots for extra books. My next trip was with two Muggleborns, one who, like yourself, also has a great curiosity for the wizarding world. I dare say you two would be great friends when attend. Shall I pick you and your parents up as well? Naruto spoke up here, if it is in London, we can make the trip ourselves if you will provide us directions. That way, we won't be a burden to you for every little time we want to visit the shops. Of course, Mr. Todd, I would be happy to. Diagon Alley is accessible through the Leaky Cauldron, a pub on Charing Cross Road, between a bookshop and a record shop. If you like, I can meet your party Saturday morning at 10 a.m. outside Leicester Square, which is rather close by. Minerva offered. It's where I had arranged to meet the others, in fact. At Naruto's nod, she nodded back, pleased. Very well, I shall see you then, Mr. Todd, Mr. Potter. I am sure it will be an educational experience. Minerva reflected to herself as she walked to a secure place to apparate to the ministry that she had enjoyed getting to meet young Mr. Potter. She would not think of him by that ridiculous title he'd been given. He had Lily's brains and her heart. She wondered if he had inherited his father's love of pranks, then shuddered to herself, praying it had skipped Harry. After all, Severus was going to be his professor, Merlin helped them. Suddenly, she was much less eager to have Harry at Hogwarts, though no less eager to have him under her, an eager student with great potential. As she walked to the flue, her professional mask was firmly in place. The ministry's attitude still rankled with her. Calling out her destination, she stepped through, relaxing slightly and walking from her office through to her quarters, hanging her hat and letting her hair down, smiling to herself as she pictured the reactions of her students to that action, especially a certain pair of redeeds. Her smile disappeared again as she recalled some of their more unpleasant activities in the name of fun. To her frustration, they were nearly impossible to catch in the act during their more spiteful pranks, and without that, Albus refused to take action. In a deliberate attempt to brighten her mood, she thought of James and Lily's boy and how glad she was that he hadn't stayed with those atrocious Dursleys. He was growing up into a fine boy already and looked to have gotten the best of both his parents. In a few years, he would be turning quite a few heads due to his looks, not just his fame, she would lay money on it. Chapter 3 Second Thoughts. The rest of the week passed amid a quiet but intense group of planning sessions among the kitsunes, tactics and goals debated and discarded, before with much regret they accepted that there were too many unknowns to make any real plans, only guidelines that they would have to be prepared to ditch at a moment's notice. Their first guideline, naturally, was to hide Harry's and by extension their own abilities. Well, it would be nice to be so overestimated that no one opposed you, they felt there was no way any society could be so completely awed by a single boy days short of his 11th birthday. That left encouraging the other sort of fatal error, having opponents underestimate you, and hidden abilities were a great way to get just that. The obvious candidates were all the chakra-related skills they had, since those were, it seemed, completely unknown, and so no one would think to look for them. Their knowledge of the wizarding world might also qualify, but it was so meager that they dismissed it. Their second guideline was also obvious. Learn all you can. Thankfully they would be expected to do some looking around and should be dismissed as tourists if they got caught looking. They were, after all, just muggles to these people and generally dismissed as harmless. The ninjas had to shake their heads at that. The last was in many ways the most obvious of all, simply to be cautious. It was also going to be surprisingly difficult to keep in mind. After all, they were the kitsunes, veterans who had survived countless fights. Saturday morning dawned at last, and the various people made their way to the meeting point. Minerva McGonagall had the furthest to go but the easiest trip. She took the flue to the leaky cauldron and then walked the rest of the way. Next to arrive were prospective student Justin Finch Fletchley and his parents, half an hour early and taking a couple of minutes to shop while they waited for the others. Next were the Grangers, they took the tube, arriving 15 minutes early, and spotted the tall professor, walking up to her and making small talk. Last of all to show themselves were Harry, Naruto and Hinata, 5 minutes later. Now that we are all here, I would like to start with some introductions. As you remember, I am Mistress McGonagall, professor while in school. To my left are Mr. Hamish and Ms. Imogen Finch Fletchley with their son Justin, then Drs. Matthew and Elizabeth Granger with their daughter Hermione, and Mr. Naruto and Ms. Hinata Todd with their son Harry. After a round of handshakes and hellos, Minerva proceeded to guide the group to their destination, asking each parent to keep hold of their child's hand in order to let them bypass the muggle-repelling charm on the leaky cauldron. She added, "Well, it is not my favorite place, it is famous within our world both for being the connection to Muggle London, as well as for the barman, Tom, a very friendly man who enjoys getting to welcome people to the alley. For some, the decor adds to the charm." Her expression mirrored her distaste briefly, then she held the door for them as they got their first taste of the wizarding world. She held back a sigh. The tiny, grubby-looking pub was just as dark and shabby as ever, and she knew it wouldn't make a good impression on the Muggles or their children. It never did. She couldn't change it, though, and no one would listen to her suggestions. In some ways she felt that the wizarding world clung to its traditions too much. As expected, Tom called out a greeting to her and added his own welcome to the families she was guiding, and soon after they made their way out the back into a small, walled courtyard empty apart from a trash can and a few weeds. Before the inevitable questions could be asked, Minerva drew her wand and tapped the appropriate brick after pointing it out. The brick quivered, and soon a hall appeared, quickly growing, and soon they faced an archway large enough for their party to go through, opening onto a cobbled street. At least this got a good reaction out of them. "Welcome to Diagon Alley. First, you may like to go to the bank, Gringotts, to exchange your money for the wizarding currency, galleons, sickles and nuts. 1 galleon is worth 17 sickles, 1 sickle is worth 29 nuts, so 1 galleon is nearly 500 nuts. Currently the galleon is set at just under £50 sterling. Before I forget, Mr. Potter, here is the key to your vault at Gringotts that your parents set up for you when you were born." She produced the key, giving it directly to the boy, who promptly made it disappear. The bank itself is run by goblins, and it's important to remember they aren't human. They have their own customs and history. Do not show your teeth to a goblin as they will likely see it as a challenger insult. Likewise, doubting the security of the bank will also be seen as an insult. While there have been attempts made to breach the bank, in over a century of goblin control, no thief has managed to steal from them. She allowed a brief smile to pierce her professional demeanor. "My own funds are stored here, and I have full trust in their security." She led the group through the streets and onward into a marble building, facing a set of silver doors with an engraved warning to thieves, before a pair of goblins bowed them through and on into the bank proper. The inside was busy, a great marble hall with scores of goblins at work with ledgers, coins or precious stones, and most noticeable to the visitors was the long counter, goblins on their sides sitting on high stools, and wizards and witches queuing up to be served. Minerva pointed out the empty aisle on the far side where currency exchanges were performed, before offering to go with the Muggle parents, in case they should want her advice or presence. After they turned down her offer, she then led Harry's family to a free teller, politely informing it that they wished to visit Mr. Potter's vault. Harry produced his key upon demand where it was examined. That seems to be in order. Very well, I will have someone take you down to the vault. Griphook. The teller bellowed the last word and another goblin came over with a rather surly expression, or so it seemed to the group. Griphook looked at them once then turned around, obviously expecting them to follow him as he walked towards one of the doors leading off the hall. He held the door for them and the change in decor was obvious. Instead of more marble there was a fairly narrow stone passageway lit with flaming torches. After a brief whistle, a cart came hurtling up the tracks toward them, stopping just short and they climbed in with Naruto aiding Minerva who was having some trouble. The ride started quickly and their cart knew the way, Griphook not even bothering to steer as they hurtled through the maze of twisting passages. Harry tried to remember all the directions simply as a test to himself, as he was sure his dad and Hinata would be doing the same, and once he thought he caught a glimpse of a burst of fire illuminating a large animal. The cart's change of direction yanked it out of his sight before he could be sure, but he would be sure to ask his parents when they got home for their impressions. As suddenly as it started, the cart stopped and Harry was a little disappointed, the ride was fun. After letting Naruto help the ladies out, Harry followed and made his way to the vault entrance where Griphook was waiting. Minerva McGonagall was standing a little distance away, her back to the door, as she didn't want to be rude and look into someone else's vault, it would be most improper. Griphook opened up, amid billowing green smoke which cleared to reveal mounds of gold coins, columns of silver and heaps of little bronze nuts. Ruthlessly suppressing a gasp, Harry turned to ask Mistress McGonagall excuse me, but how much would you recommend I withdraw for my Hogwarts supplies? Minerva considered the question briefly. If you don't go overboard, you can acquire everything you need new for about 15 galleons. If you wish to buy any souvenirs or trinkets, I'd recommend another few galleons at most. Thank you very much. Harry counted out the 20 galleons she had indicated, then another 30 just in case. Luckily for him, McGonagall still had her back turned to give him privacy, so she didn't see quite how much he withdrew. As he left the vault, he passed most of the money to Naruto to keep it safe. After all, who would be able to mug his dad? The return trip was also quiet and Harry noted that they took a different route. Once back in the marble hall, they were reunited with the rest of their party and left to begin their shopping. Mindful of two of her new students, she decided to take them to the bookstores last. Their first stop was Madame Malkin's robes for all occasions to be measured. Madame Malkin took to giving Harry and Justin her attention, while Hermione went off with her assistant. Justin and Harry were directed to stand on footstools, where Madame Malkin draped a rather shapeless oversized robe on each of them, before proceeding to pin them back to the correct measurements. Harry found the process just about the same as in a normal shop, with only the style of clothing having changed, though he was spared being stuck by pins as some shops had done. He decided to chat with Justin while they doubled as mannequins. From earlier observations, he sized Justin up as having come from a fairly well-to-do family and guessed that he would expect a more formal introduction. He tried to recall his etiquette lessons to cover it, but failed so he decided to wing it. Hello, I'm Harry Potter. Justin Finch Fletchley. I'd shake your hand, but I appear to be tied up at the moment. Justin's upper-class accent was clear, as was his sense of humor. Of course. So, what do you do when you're not used as a stand-in for a store mannequin? Harry asked, smiling at the other boy. Well, I quite like rugby, though mother doesn't like me playing it, she feels it's too dangerous for me. Justin rolled his eyes and Harry nodded. Sure, his parents put him through a lot of dangerous things, but they were always there to keep it from going too far, protecting him. My school had more interest in football, and I liked playing in the midfield. I was captain of the school team this year, and we didn't do too badly against the other schools in the region. Soon enough, all the measurements had been taken, the robes had been taken off them, and they were free to escape until later in the day when they would pick up their finished robes. Their next stop was Ollivander's wand shop for their wands, something that got both the children and their parents excited. Minerva would later reflect that Harry's tendency to attract trouble manifested itself even here before he got to Hogwarts. The visit started as normal, the group entering the shop, Ollivander nowhere inside and presumed to be out the back of the shop. Just as Ollivander opened his mouth to surprise his customers, Naruto spoke up. Ah, Mr. Ollivander, I presume. Caught by surprise himself, Ollivander took a couple of seconds to find his voice. Garrick Ollivander at your service, sir. He walked around in front of the group, still off balance at his ambush turned upon him like that. Ah, yes, I thought I'd be seeing you soon. Harry Potter. At this statement, Harry almost rolled his eyes. It was like this man was trying to be extra spooky for his customers. The way he was ignoring everyone else, however, struck him as plain rude. You have your mother's eyes. 10 1/4 inches long, swishy, made of willow. Nice wand for charm work. When Ollivander moved closer to crowd Harry, he received several glares including from McGonagall and gave it up as a bad idea. Your father, on the other hand, favored a mahogany wand. 11 inches. Pliable. A little more power and excellent for transfiguration. Well, I say your father favored it, it's really the wand that chooses the wizard, of course. Harry spoke up at this, what do you mean the wand chooses the wizard? Aren't they just dead bits of wood? How can they choose anything? It almost sounds like you make wands for the wands, rather than making them for the wizards. Naruto put a hand on Harry's shoulder, and Harry stilled. My apologies, now may we get started with buying these sticks? At Ollivander's expression, he quickly amended that. These wands, that is. We want to get 3 for Harry for now. If he runs low, then we'll return for more. 3 wands. Well, they are fairly expensive, and Harry is good with taking care of his tools, so we don't see much risk that he'll need more than that this year. But 1 wand, 1 wizard. That's the way it's done. Well, we're not doing it that way, sir. If we only got 1 wand for Harry then it would only take 1 accident and Harry would be left unable to complete his classes, wouldn't he? Now, we understand that wands are sold here and we are looking to buy them. Why aren't you happy with making more money? I thought you were in business. Naruto looked politely confused. While Minerva was still caught by surprise, Mr. Finch Fletchley spoke up at this point, adding his support. We also want 3 wands for our boy. And 3 for our Hermione, Elizabeth Granger added. Ollivander was looking more upset. I sell 1 wand per wizard, as I sell only the very best match to each. There are no finer wands anywhere. Naruto shared a look with the other parents and decided to soothe some feathers. Then we will only buy 1 wand each from you. His smile was calculated to reassure Ollivander while his wife discreetly reminded the other parents that there was another wand shop in the alley they had passed on the way to the bank. Very well, sir. Ollivander pulled a long tape measure out of his pocket. Mr. Potter, which is your wand arm? And how would I know that, Mr. Ollivander? Harry asked, very reasonably he thought. Which do you write with? Oh, my right arm. Hold out your arm, that's it. Ollivander proceeded to measure Harry in a variety of odd ways and spoke as he measured. Every Ollivander wand has a core of a powerful magical substance. We use unicorn hairs, phoenix tail feathers, and the heartstrings of dragons. No 2 wands are the same, just as no 2 unicorns, dragons or phoenixes are quite the same. Here he looked briefly at Naruto before adding, and of course, you will never get such good results with another wizard's wand. What followed was that Ollivander would hand Harry a wand, tell him to wave it, snatch it out of Harry's hand, then pluck out another wand from his stock and repeat the process. 1 wand, a dozen, then 2 dozen, Ollivander looked positively gleeful. Ah, a tricky customer. Let's try this one. Before anyone could ask what he meant, he disappeared and returned carrying a wand he treated almost reverently. Holly and phoenix feather, 11 inches, nice and supple. Give it a wave. Harry took the wand and felt a sudden warmth in his fingers. He raised it above his head and gave it a wave, producing a wave of multicolored sparks. Oh, very good, indeed. Curious, however, most curious. Harry sighed a bit, wishing the man would just quit being so melodramatic. What is most curious, Mr. Ollivander? Why, I remember every wand I have ever sold, every single one. It so happens that the phoenix whose tail feather is in your wand gave another feather, and only one. It is very curious indeed that you should be destined for this wand when its brother chose he who must not be named. Curious indeed how these things happen. I think we must expect great things from you, Mr. Potter. After all, he who must not be named did great things terrible, yes, but great. Harry nodded keeping his expression firmly under control, and Naruto paid for the wand, as well as a comfortable holster, and finally it was time for the other 2 children to get their wands. Everyone was happy except for the proprietor when they found their matches much quicker, they paid and left. After a quick break at Florian Fortescue's, they resumed their shopping, fairly quickly filling the rest of their list and starting with trunks, where they got ones engraved with runes to provide 3 compartments for extra space and to resize the trunk at the touch of the owner's wand. These made the rest of the shopping a breeze. Even the bookstore was less painful than Minerva had feared, or maybe it was just that after the trip to Ollivander's, everything else seemed easy. Even the side trip to Jimmy Cadell's wonderful wands where the parents managed to get their spare wands wasn't that big a production. Harry found a decent match, he thought, with a dogwood and dragon heartstring combination. When he gave it a wave, it gave off sparks and also gave Hermione a set of foxy ears until Minerva reversed the transformation with a wave of her wand. Harry studiously ignored his parents' amused and teasing looks. The quick visit to Elip's Owl Emporium and a permission form from Minerva to allow Harry to have both his cat Cesarina, which at least behaved like his familiar, and an owl for contact with his parents, saw him purchase a beautiful snowy owl he named Miyuki. With their robes ready at Madame Malkin's, their excursion was complete. Minerva escorted the group back out through the leaky cauldron and into the late afternoon sun, bidding her future students farewell with her usual professional demeanor firmly in place. Before they split up, the children asked their parents if they could keep in touch. Phone numbers and addresses were exchanged, with Hermione happy that Harry was only in Surrey and able to visit more easily than Justin, whose family lived in the Lakes district. She and Harry had bonded rather quickly when they discovered their shared love of books, and she gave a big smile and heartfelt yes when he asked her to be his friend. Harry and his parents returned home, and as soon as they had gotten everything sorted out to be examined by the clan, Harry asked to use the phone, giving Hermione a call. She was excited to hear from him so soon. Apparently she was afraid he would change his mind. Harry laughed, saying he had worried about that too, and then asked her about the book she bought, with the conversation drifting from there over various other topics. Harry was happy that she invited him over, with their parents' permission, and promptly invited her to attend his birthday party the following Saturday afternoon, instead. Their plans made, they hung up and went their own ways, Hermione to dinner and Harry to a debrief of the day by the clan, over a dinner made by Naruto naturally. Harry set himself to speed-read his course books with the aid of the memorization techniques he was taught, wanting to get that out of the way that night so he could free up time for all the other things he had to do. Most important of all was to decide before his birthday if he should go to Hogwarts. It was one comment from his parents that effectively made the decision for him. "You could always go to both schools, Harry. That's the advantage of the shadow clone technique. And if it doesn't measure up, just come home. We can always find another way to learn magic if you need it." With just that, Harry's worries disappeared. He could send clones to regular school while the real him went to Hogwarts. While the clones would have to disperse regularly, they were able to replace themselves before switching. Sure, he would have to work out the logistics, decide where to allocate his clones and so on, but the relief of being able to do both was stronger than he would have expected. He went to sleep with a smile on his face, content for now to leave the decision until the morning. "I should have known better," Harry thought to himself and smiled. His parents had gone all out for this birthday, inviting all his friends and some parents too, though he caught the preparations for the parents including some of Naruto's best cooking, as well as some nice single malt scotch set aside for later. It wasn't the first time his parents had thrown a large party, but it was the first time they had thrown such a large one for Harry. Then again, this is the first time I've had time off completely in years, not even a single clone working or training. It's kinda odd, actually, refreshing, but also weird. I keep expecting one of them to drag me off to lessons." He grinned, remembering some of his more recent jokes when they tried that. Intellectually he knew that most of them had been deliberately allowed to succeed, but it was still so funny seeing his dad dyed pink from head to toe. He petted Cesarina as he sat down on the couch, relaxing as ordered, while a small army of clones tended to every detail of the party. Miyuki flew in, claiming his shoulder for her perch and rubbing her head against him until he gave her attention too. Leaning back, Harry finally enjoyed his enforced break until the doorbell rang. He got up and smiled, Cesarina held in one arm, and answered the door. "Ashley, Stephanie, Michelle, Ella, Megan and Sandra." His smile threatened to split his face, and after a round of hugs, he stepped aside to allow his friends into the living room where he had been waiting, dutifully handing over his cat to Megan who cooed over her. "I can't wait to see their faces when they discover that their cute little cat is really a powerful tiger." In idle moments, he wondered that no one had ever connected his cat with the occasionally seen big cats that lived in the forest when their colors matched so well, but he supposed it was a bit much given what they knew. After all, a race of tigers with a miniature form was far from normal. Within minutes, Harry was involved in the conversation when the bell rang again as other guests arrived. This kept up until everyone was there, including Hermione and her parents. Hermione was rather shy around his girls until Harry broke the ice, asking her if she was reading anything good at the moment. Her quick look at the others revealed none of the warning signs she had come to know all too well, and she relaxed, getting pulled into the group quickly and finding to her pleasure that she was welcome and that Harry's friends shared at least part of her love of reading. Harry used a variety of tricks to keep the subject of the new school year from being raised, aided he found by Hermione. A shared look told him that she knew he couldn't talk about Hogwarts and was trying to help keep the secret, a small nod back conveyed his gratitude. Dinner was a big success and the cakes garnered praise from everyone. The cake was cut, the songs were sung, the guests eventually made their way home at last. Harry collapsed, exhausted in a way the ninja training had never managed. Some quiet words with Naruto and his mums and Harry made his way to bed, falling asleep only after his brain stopped replaying the day. As days settled down, deciding how he would apportion his shadow clones in the coming year, 2 would go to school with his girls, one taking his place while the other was there as a backup in case the primary was dispelled, and refining his chakra control in his spare time. 4 would work on his ninja training and trade skills with his parents. That left 6 to go to Hogwarts, exploring and investigating everything he could find, as well as watching his back. He completed his reading of the school books for the year and rewarded himself with pleasure reading, defined within his family as reading you do without the speed reading techniques. He worked his way through some extra books on potions, seeing as the prescribed textbook listed known recipes, but was dangerously lacking on other information like basic ingredient preparation or safety precautions. That led to studying more information on magical plants and animals, and so on. He also spent time with his friends both old and new, having an afternoon at the Granger's home the Friday following his birthday. It was a nice warm home, a blend of modern conveniences and older style furnishings that somehow worked well. As he expected, there weren't many sweets on offer, but he certainly couldn't complain about the food, not that he would. Harry also discovered that Hermione inherited her love of books from both parents, the family library taking up 2 whole rooms of their London home, and it included a healthy selection of science fiction and fantasy classics, including some that Harry hadn't been able to find in the town library. A quiet time of reading and a nice walk around the neighborhood made for a peaceful time. While Harry had also spoken with Justin, they hadn't been able to arrange for visits due to the distance. As the last week before Hogwarts approached, his parents became more demonstrative of their love for him. While they knew that his clones would be around, they were also sending him off into a new world with unknown dangers. They also drilled him on his escape and evasion techniques. If they couldn't be there with him to help out or face their share of it, they wanted to do what they could to ensure he came home to them. Saturday the 31st of August arrived, and the entire clan made their way into London to King's Cross Station, scouting the area, before heading towards where platform 9 3/4 was supposed to be. Harry found the wall easily enough. He gave the wall a quick feel, but it felt completely solid to his touch. He took a breath, remembering his new professor's words about approaching the wall with intent to pass, and gave it a go. While it would be embarrassing if he were failed, he could stand the risk, so a brisk pace, and his goal firmly in mind, and Harry made it. He looked around even as he tried to fade into the background, calling on his training and hoping he hadn't been noticed in that brief time. It seemed luck was with him, though he guessed that shouldn't be surprising. No child was expected to use the portal a day early, and they would hardly be watching every second of the day anyway. As he completed his initial survey, he headed on back to the normal side of the station where he was examined by his family. When he suggested going back now that they know it was safe, Yuga reminded him that they weren't even able to watch him go through the first time. Harry could have slapped himself. When we went to that pub, we had to hold our parents' hands to let you see it and come with us. Let's try that here. Anko Mum suggested trying something else that would let them speed it up if it worked, so as Harry approached the portal again, he had his parents' hands in his hands, on his arms and shoulders and anywhere they could reach. It passed the first test when they didn't suddenly find better things to do, and the second when they all made it through, the adults immediately disappearing from sight as Anko Mum took him out of the way. He sighed, he knew they were being more protective for a reason, even knew what it was, but it was still a bit demeaning. Anko Mum simply wrapped him up in a tighter hug and distracted him from his peak by rubbing against him. She just loved the way he still blushed at that. After a thorough examination of the wizard side of the portal, they returned, noting that they didn't need assistance for that, and went out to lunch before some last-minute shopping. As Harry was taken through department stores and their clothing department, he reflected it was strange, though par for the course for his life, that any member of his family could create finer and better tailored clothes than he had ever seen in a shop, even Harry himself, though he admitted that he might be pushing it there. The dinner that night was an excuse for the clan to make the very best feast they could, and they made sure he had packed his weapons and armor, his books and clothes, and the rest of his equipment. They always started with the most important items, they said. A touch of excitement and anxiety wasn't enough to stop him sleeping, they had burned that reaction out of him years ago in training, and he woke up rested and thankful for that as they showered, changed, ate breakfast and headed out to the station. King's Cross is quieter than yesterday, Harry thought as he dodged the crowds. He always felt a little crowded in London, and he made his way through to the portal fairly quickly, bringing his parents through again, all but Naruto and Anko Mum fading out of sight, and Harry looked around the still fairly empty platform. He had an hour until the train was due to depart, and there it was, a red steam engine reminiscent of a popular class from the 19th century, if he remembered what Michelle said. She was the train enthusiast of his little group. The crew were there, checking it over and getting it ready, he guessed, and a few adults in robes were scattered around the place, while their children either stayed close by or were, he figured, already on the train. Like his parents, Harry tried to assess the people he saw. Already he spotted signs that they were wizards, their clothes were either completely wrong, these robes and pointy hats that Hogwarts demanded, or their fashions had odd failures, like that tweed jacket, pipe unlit, and men's shoes on a middle-aged woman. Harry got out a book to pass the time until his friends arrived, reading arithmancy by the numbers. A beginner's guide since he was curious about the subject, wondering how similar it was to the maths he'd learned in school and with his family. He just finished the first section and was starting the next when he noticed familiar bushy hair appear through the portal, putting the book away and heading over to greet Hermione. The moment she spotted him was easy to recognize, the big smile was a giveaway and she rushed over to him, talking seemingly without breathing. "Did you know I found you listed in another 5 books? They've got even more stories about what happened to you and where you disappeared." Harry winced, for all Hermione's enthusiasm she still suffered occasional lapses of tact and even after all that his family had done for him, he was still understandably pained by the reminder that his original parents were murdered and he was left with the Dursleys. To her credit, she quickly realized her error and began stammering her apology, leaving him to let her off the hook. At least she was learning and coming out of her shell. He had hopes that in time she would be as easy to be around as his other girls, then cursed to himself at even thinking of them as his girls' damned parents and their teasing, they were getting to him. He didn't notice that he smiled as he thought of them as his. When Justin joined them a few minutes later they started saying their goodbyes to their parents and getting onto the train to find a compartment. They found plenty empty and claimed one close to the back of the train in the hope that they wouldn't have to share with strangers. They settled in and waved goodbye again from the train as it pulled out from the station, taking their seats and getting comfortable. After talking about their time since they met in the alley, including Justin passing on his congratulations about Harry's birthday again, they discussed what they thought Hogwarts would be like. An hour into the trip, there was a timid knock at the door. Since Justin was closest, he opened up to see a round-faced boy almost in tears. "Sorry," he said, "but you have seen a toad at all?" They shook their heads and Hermione stood up. "No, we haven't, but I'll help you look if you like. I'm Hermione Granger." The boy was looking a little happier at the offer of help. "Thank you, and I'm Neville Longbottom." Harry stood up, offering his hand, "And I'm Harry. Justin, would you mind our compartment while we help Neville here?" "Sure, Harry." Justin leaned back, keeping guard of their trunks, while Harry and Hermione went off to do their good deed for the day. He reflected that it was something of a relief not to be the Finch-Fletchley heir here, as well as how odd his new world was turning out to be. Pet toads, making a hero out of a baby. Not that Harry seemed to like his fame any more than Justin liked the way his classmates had treated him different because of his surname and the weird clothing. He idly wondered what else would happen. A few compartments into the search, after asking Neville about his toad, Harry asked if there was any magic that could find the toad for them, or better yet take it to them. Neville brightened and said there was, so after that they searched for an older student who they could ask to cast it for them. They got lucky with a student with a shiny blue and bronze badge on her chest with the letter P on it. She quickly cast a couple of spells, and Trevor the toad zoomed into her hand before being quickly passed to Neville. She also conjured a new cage and made Neville put him inside. Red-faced, Neville quickly complied and thanked her before almost fleeing the compartment. Harry and Hermione caught up to him at the end of the carriage, asking if he would like to spend time with them, maybe help them get to understand this new world. Justin, when asked, thought it was a good idea. His family were encouraging him to work hard and do well, but he was painfully aware that he could use all the help he could get. Plus it wasn't like Neville was a bother, so he offered the seat beside him since Harry and Hermione took the other side. An hour later the door was yanked open. 3 boys entered, the center one had a pale, pointed face and a superior air that increased as he looked over the people in the compartment, noting that only one of the children inside were from a respectable pureblood family, and rumor had it that the Longbottom boy was almost a squib. He sneered mentally, secure that his minions were on his flanks. "Well, Longbottom, they're saying up and down the train that Harry Potter is coming to Hogwarts. I don't suppose a squib like you has seen him, have you?" Before Neville could answer, the arrogant boy followed up his own question. "Oh, look how the Longbottoms have fallen, consorting with a bunch of mudbloods, now." Harry looked up at the pale, blonde boy. A quick evaluation later prompted him to comment. "And what makes you think this Harry Potter kid would want anything to do with you? No. Unless you have something intelligent to contribute, move along please. We don't appreciate the interruption." The arrogant boy swelled up with indignation. "And just who do you think you are to tell a Malfoy what to do?" Drawing on much of his etiquette training from Hinaudium, Harry decided a highbrow insult would suffice. "Given that you haven't actually introduced yourself and still see fit to cause problems, I see no reason to acquaint myself with such an uncouth person. I am Draco, son of Lucius and Narcissa Malfoy, pureblood since time immemorial. If you don't even know that, then you are obviously beneath my notice. Come, Crabbe, Goyle, let's leave these lowly mudbloods to wallow in their filth." The trio sneered at the seated group before turning and leaving the compartment. Harry looked at the group. "Not very bright, is he? He barged in, insulted everyone present when he had no idea who we were, he didn't even notice that I match at least part of the descriptions they all have of me. I don't know about any of you, but I won't be in a hurry to spend time with someone that lacking in manners and sense." Neville choked on his own spit before sputtering out, "You're Harry Potter." Harry grinned, "That's me. We all read the descriptions in the books and I'm still wondering who provided those." He growled, then calmed down so he didn't scare off the new boy. "As you can see, I'm just a boy and I certainly haven't rescued maidens from any dragons." He smiled, trying to help set Neville at ease. "Though I suppose that would be easier than some of my missions." "Don't worry about it, mate. I know I didn't tell you my surname when we met and the fame is why. I'm not used to it, I don't like it, and I don't understand why they praised me for dealing with their serial killer when there were two adults with wands and training and everything right there with every reason in the world to do it for me. Besides, I was just a baby, what was I going to do? Cry at him?" Neville's answering laugh was a little forced, but he saw Harry's point. Between that and Harry not kicking him out, he was calming down again. Hermione's questioning about being raised magical helped settle him further, and being able to answer their questions, being the one they looked up to in even a small way, did wonders for his confidence, enough that he could really relax and enjoy himself for the first time that day. The discussion about the houses at Hogwarts was something of an eye-opener for each of them. Hermione mentioned what she had heard, that Ravenclaw was for the smart, Gryffindor for the brave, Hufflepuff for the loyal and Slytherin for the ambitious. Neville added that the houses had something of a different reputation. People thought Gryffindor was for the good and noble, or for the fearless idiots, depending who you asked. Ravenclaw was supposedly for the know-it-alls. Slytherin was where evil wizards and dark lords were spawned, since that's where you know who got most of his followers. Lastly, Hufflepuff was effectively a dumping ground for those not good enough for the other houses. He also said he didn't know how they were chosen, his gran refused to tell him, since that was the tradition. The way he said it, she was very devoted to traditions. Justin said that those reputations didn't make much sense if the division was made honestly. For example, Slytherins were supposed to be ambitious and cunning, but you don't have to be a future Dark Lord to have ambitions, they come in all shapes and sizes. Justin said his ambition was to do well at Hogwarts for his family and to see what he could do to help them using what he learned. Harry had a different sort of observation. He said that if they got to choose, they should choose based on what sort of people they wanted around them, as long as they got all the same teachers, which it looked like they did. If you went to Gryffindor, you would be surrounded by people more likely to be brave, which sounds good, but since they aren't sorted for their brains also means they may be reckless idiots. In Ravenclaw, they should be smart enough, but you're not guaranteed they'll be helpful, trustworthy or good. Slytherin sounded more like a snake pit, especially with its already bad reputation pushing the people in it in certain ways. While they could presumably learn to be more cunning there, he thought it would probably be too political, especially for him as their boy who lived. Hufflepuff was supposed to get the hard-working and the loyal, and that sounded more like the type of people he liked around him if he couldn't choose for himself. From the description, he felt they would be the friendliest people, even if they weren't supposed to be the most brilliant or cunning or brave. He smiled at Hermione, "I think it would be the best place for you, don't you? I know I could always use more trustworthy friends. And Justin, you sound hard-working enough for them, right? Neville, what do you think?" Neville wasn't sure, he couldn't set aside his society's perception so easily and still hoped he'd be good enough to be in Gryffindor like the rest of his family. He quickly changed the subject. Neville's story about his first accidental magic was worrying. Being hung by his feet by his own family trying to scare him into showing his magic. Harry felt some sympathy for the other boy, ruthlessly suppressing the memories of his own abuse at the hands of family still. It helped start up a list of funny stories and incidents, and they had a good time, getting changed into their robes half an hour before they were due to arrive at Hogsmeade Station, the boys leaving the compartment first to give Hermione her privacy, then she did the same for them. As the train pulled into the station, the corridor was already filled with students eager to get off and stretch their legs after the long ride cooped up together. Neville suggested that they wait until the crowd was gone, an idea they all endorsed. After they got out, leaving their luggage on the train as instructed, onto the dark platform, a lamp came bobbing over the heads of the students, and a deep voice rumbled, "First years. First years over here. Come on, follow me. Mind your step now." They saw a big beard on an even bigger man, the owner of the voice, and followed him and the other younger students down a steep and narrow path. "You'll get your first sight o' Hogwarts in a sec," the big man called over his shoulder, "just as round this bend here." There was a chorus of oohs as the path suddenly opened up onto the edge of a large black lake, stars reflected in its cool waters. Beyond it atop a rise perched a vast castle with many turrets and towers, its windows sparkling as much as the lake. "No more'n 4 to a boat," Hagrid called, pointing to a fleet of little boats sitting in the water by the shore. Harry helped Hermione first into their boat followed by Neville, Justin and himself. "Everyone in?" Hagrid shouted from his own vessel, having a boat all to himself. "Right then, forward." And the boats moved off all at once, gliding across the lake, which was as smooth as glass. Everyone was silent, staring up at the great castle towering over them as they sailed nearer and nearer to the cliff on which it stood. "Heads down." Hagrid yelled as the first boats reached the cliff. They all bent their heads, and the little boats carried them through a curtain of ivy that hid a wide opening in the cliff face. They were carried along a dark tunnel, which seemed to be taking them right underneath the castle, until they reached a kind of underground harbor, where they clambered out onto rocks and pebbles. Then they clambered up a passageway in the rock after Hagrid's lamp, coming out at last onto smooth damp grass right in the shadow of the castle. A flight of stone steps and a landing later, they were crowded around the huge oak front door. Hagrid raised a gigantic fist and knocked 3 times on the castle door. Chapter 4 Surprising Harry Potter. The great doors opened at once, a tall, black-haired witch in emerald green robes stood there who Harry and his friends all recognized. "The fur's yours, Professor McGonagall," Hagrid said. "Thank you, Hagrid. I will take them from here." She pulled the door wide. The entrance hall was so big, you could have fit the whole of the school gym in it. The stone walls were lit with flaming torches like the ones at Gringotts, the ceiling was too high to make out, and a magnificent marble staircase facing them led to the upper floors. As they followed the professor across the flagged stone floor, Harry could pick out the voices of hundreds of people through a doorway to the right, but she directed them into a smaller, empty chamber off to the side. They crowded together to draw some mutual comfort as their nerves mounted. "Welcome to Hogwarts," introduced Professor McGonagall. "The start of term banquet will begin shortly, but before you take your seats in the Great Hall, you will be sorted into your houses. The sorting is a very important ceremony because, while you are here, your house will be something like your family within Hogwarts. You will have classes with the rest of your house, sleep in your house dormitory, and spend free time in your house common room. The 4 houses are called Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw, and Slytherin. Each house has its own noble history, and each has produced outstanding witches and wizards. While you are at Hogwarts, your triumphs will earn your house points, while any rule breaking will lose house points. At the end of the year, the house with the most points is awarded the House Cup, a great honor. I hope each of you will be a credit to whichever house becomes yours. The sorting ceremony will take place in a few minutes in front of the rest of the school. I suggest you all smarten yourselves up as much as you can while you are waiting." Her eyes lingered for a moment on Goyle's cloak, which was fastened under his left ear, and on a red-headed boy's smudged nose. Harry waited placidly, an island of calm that Hermione was clinging to. Coupled with his tall, lean body, it made him stand out amongst his peers. "I shall return when we are ready for you," Professor McGonagall instructed. "Please wait quietly." She left the chamber. Neville loudly swallowed. "How exactly do they sort us into houses?" Harry overheard someone ask the red-headed boy. "Some sort of test, I think. Fred said it hurts a lot, but I think he was joking." No one was talking much except Hermione, who was whispering very fast about all the spells she'd learned and wondering which one she'd need. Harry squeezed her hand. He kept his body still, trying to portray a confidence he didn't quite feel. Any second now, Professor McGonagall would come back and lead him to his future. Then something happened that made that reed jump about a foot in the air. Several people behind him screamed. "What the boy gasped. So did the people around him. About 20 ghosts had just streamed through the back wall. Pearly white and slightly transparent, they glided across the room talking to one another and hardly glancing at the first years. They seemed to be arguing. What looked like a fat little monk was saying, "Forgive and forget, I say, we ought to give him a second chance. My dear Friar, haven't we given Peeves all the chances he deserves? He gives us all a bad name and you know, he's not really even a ghost. I say, what are you all doing here?" A ghost wearing a ruff and tights had suddenly noticed the first years. Nobody answered. "New students," said the fat friar, smiling around at them. "About to be sorted, I suppose." A few people nodded mutely. "Hope to see you in Hufflepuff," said the friar. "My old house, you know." "Move along now," said a sharp voice. "The sorting ceremony's about to start." Professor McGonagall had returned. One by one, the ghosts floated away through the opposite wall. "Now, form a line," Professor McGonagall told the first years, "and follow me." Feeling the rush of adrenaline as his body prepared for combat, Harry clamped down ruthlessly on the reaction, getting into line behind a boy with sandy hair, with Hermione behind him, and they walked out of the chamber, back across the hall, and through a pair of double doors into the Great Hall. Harry looked around the place curiously. For such an old building it was certainly impressive, and he wondered how much it had been renovated since its construction. It was lit by thousands and thousands of candles that were floating in midair over 4 long tables where the rest of the students were sitting. Harry idly wondered how they dealt with drips of wax. The tables were laid with glittering golden plates and goblets. At the top of the hall was another long table where the teachers were sitting. Professor McGonagall led the first years up here so that they came to a halt in a line facing the other students, with the teachers behind them. The hundreds of faces staring at them looked like pale lanterns in the flickering candlelight, and Harry's back itched between his shoulder blades at being so exposed. Dotted here and there among the students, the ghosts shone misty silver. After noting and dismissing the staring eyes, Harry looked upward and saw a velvety black ceiling dotted with stars. He heard Hermione whisper, "It's bewitched to look like the sky outside. I read about it in Hogwarts, a history." It was hard to believe there was a ceiling there at all, and that the Great Hall didn't simply open onto the heavens. Harry watched as Professor McGonagall silently placed a four-legged stool in front of the first years. On top of the stool she put a pointed wizard's hat. This hat was patched and frayed and extremely dirty. His parents would have picked it apart and remade it from scratch. Maybe we have to try and get a rabbit out of it. Harry thought wildly, that seemed the sort of crazy thing wizards would enjoy. He noticed that everyone in the hall was now staring at the hat expectantly. For a few seconds, there was complete silence. Then the hat twitched. A rip near the brim opened wide like a mouth, and the hat began to sing badly. Harry's surprise lasted less than a second, as strangely enough he'd encountered weirder events than this. He listened to the lyrics and noted that it seemed their information was right about what traits were sought for each house, and he felt he would probably qualify for any of them. He also reaffirmed his earlier decision as to which house he preferred. Better to be surrounded by patient and loyal friends. Just get the mission done and get home. He noted the song had finished, and some of the others were whispering about having to wrestle a troll or some such insanity. He did wonder with a part of his mind just how much trouble it would cause if he destroyed the hat, as other students were called up, put the hat on and were sorted. Since his name started with a P, he would be waiting a while. He saw with pleasure that both Justin and Hermione were both made Hufflepuffs and hid his surprise when Neville got Gryffindor. He'd have picked the boy for another puff, as he didn't think him braver than he was patient. That arrogant blonde got sorted straight into Slytherin, causing him to smirk, and Harry thought he caught some displeasure from a cute redeed also in green and silver trim that had been sorted into Slytherin just minutes ago. What was her name? Ah, that's it, Greengrass. He should pay more attention, really. Padma was quietly sorted into Ravenclaw, and Harry figured he would be up very soon. Two more girls were next, both new Gryffindors, then Potter, Harry. He walked up lightly to the stool, sat down and waited, doing his best to ignore the whispers from all the tables and people gawking like they were at a bloody zoo, including a couple at the staff table. The hat was dropped over his head and still he waited, keeping his anger in check as best he could. Without conscious thought, he thought of and discarded plan after plan to destroy a ratty old thing. Inventive certainly. Harry heard a small voice say. Most impressive in someone so young to have so many new and unusual ways to destroy me. Now, while your mind is guarded and well, I can still read the surface thoughts, which is how I saw your creative plans. I am happy to report that most of the methods you had in mind are prevented by other magics. And before you start trying to plot my demise in a way that will bypass any protections, I want to assure you that no one, not a single person or a group, may be privy to the sorting. Sorting is what I was made to do, and sorting is all I can do, and none of the founders would have approved of the secrets I may see becoming public. After all, they had to test me when I was first made, and as accomplished wizards and witches naturally they had their own secrets that they wouldn't reveal to any stranger that came along after their deaths. Now, can you lower your defenses long enough to allow me to carry out my one purpose? And what guarantee do I have that you are telling the truth? I have never seen you before nor apparently are there any other hats that do the same job, so I can't even compare you to something else in my experience. A good question. Unfortunately, there is no guarantee I can give you at this time that you would accept, is there? Whatever I promise, you don't have reason to trust me. All I can offer is that you may talk to any wizard or witch, and none will be able to tell you of the details of someone else's sorting that they heard from me. That would allow you to check my word later, even if it does not help us at this moment. You could always come back and try to destroy me if you find I lied, the hat offered. Correction, I will come back and destroy the sorting hat, sentient historical artifact or no, if you have lied to me. Very well, I would rather get this over and done anyway. Harry slowly lowered his Yamanaka-style defenses and waited, wondering if he would feel this intrusion. A second later he got his answer, a mild headache spreading from the center of his brain. The headache started to ease again almost immediately, and he heard the voice in his ear. Difficult, most difficult, and I do apologize for that mild discomfort, you hadn't cleared all of your defenses yet, and I tripped a minor trap. If I was anybody else, I'm sure I would have a splitting migraine. This time the voice wasn't in his ears. Harry thought back at it, let me make it easier for you, then. If you put me in Slytherin then neither you nor that house will survive. I have read the histories available, and there are too many children of terrorists in that house. Before long I would be forced to kill in self-defense, and the blood would flow from there. I wouldn't be surprised if I was eventually one of only 3 magical humans left in Britain as the bloodshed spread and idiots attacked me, my friends or my family. The destruction of wizardry and witchcraft would be directly traced to your decision right here to place me in the House of the Snakes. If you put me in Gryffindor, I'll have to put up with reckless fools who don't think ahead of time. While Ravenclaw would be better than the House of the Lions, at least I would get decent conversation and some peace and quiet. I would still be apart from my friends. I don't want to leave them alone, especially Hermione Granger. You must have noticed she needs her friends close to her. Sort me into Hufflepuff and it will be better for your school, better for me, and best for my friends. You were right before, you would be welcomed by any of the founders. Indeed, you're braver than Godric with what you faced. You have argued your case as well as Rowena. Your new parents have developed your cunning to a level that would worry Salazar, but with Merlin as my witness, your 70-hour workdays will knock them dead when you join your friends in Hufflepuff. Harry realized that the last word was shouted out to the Great Hall and took off the hat to a few moments of silence before clapping and cheering broke out at his new house. He set the sorting hat back on the stool and walked over, taking a seat between Hermione and Justin, smiling broadly at them. Most of Harry's smile was for joining his friends at the house he wanted, but part of it was for pulling a successful prank on the wizarding world's expectations. The rest of the sorting went by normally, and the crowd of students were getting restless as Professor McGonagall took the sorting hat away. Once she returned, the old man got up from his throne-like golden chair, beaming at his students, arms open wide, as if nothing could have pleased him more. "Welcome," he said, "welcome to a new year at Hogwarts. Before we begin our banquet, I would like to say a few words. And here they are. Nitwit. Blubber. Oddment. Tweak. Thank you." He sat back down amid clapping and cheering from many of the students. "Well," Hermione began, "that was certainly unusual. At least he's the first politician I've heard say something truthful," Harry put in. "A few words, indeed." He grinned. Sure, he still didn't like the old man, his repeated attempts to steal away Harry's family ensured that, but he wasn't blind to when the man did something good or impressive. "Why did you call him a politician?" Justin asked. "Well, in addition to being Albus Dumbledore, headmaster of Hogwarts, he also has 2 other jobs. He's something called the Supreme Mugwimp of the International Confederation of Wizards, which seems to be a bit like our UN, and he is the chief warlock of the Wizengamot, something of a mix of parliament and the courts. That's 2 important political jobs he holds, in addition to being the headmaster of the only school of magic in Great Britain. Plus there's the speech he just made. It's great for winning people over, just like politicians want, right?" Harry explained, correctly he thought. Justin changed the subject. "Hey look, the food's arrived." And so it had. In an instant all the empty platters were now filled, piled high with food. The jugs were filled with a few different drinks, but almost all of them were something that looked similar to orange juice. One taste was enough to make Harry convinced there was something wrong with the taste buds of the wizarding world. "What is that awful stuff?" he exclaimed, unable to restrain himself. The blonde boy 2 seats down showed his surprise at both Harry's dislike of the drink as well as his ignorance. "That's pumpkin juice, of course. Haven't you had it before?" "Oh, sorry, I'm Ernest Macmillan, call me Ernie." Harry offered his hand. "Hi, I'm Harry Potter. And no, I hadn't met a wizard since I was a baby until I met Justin here outside the Leaky Cauldron a month ago. Hermione and I met there with Professor McGonagall to get our stuff for school. And I only met the professor a couple of days before that when she came to prove magic was real like she does for the other Muggleborns." "But Harry, you're not Muggleborn. Both your parents were magical," Ernie replied. "I might as well be, though. After all, it's not like there's any difference apart from environment, I read. We called it Muggle raised, but I guess I see what you mean. It's just a bit of a surprise to think you didn't even know about magic. I mean, you're the boy who lived. You're famous." He stopped hastily, sensing Harry's change in mood. "Yes, I'm famous because my parents were murdered by some nutcase that has everyone scared even after he's dead," he growled. "Sorry Harry." Ernie apologized hastily, putting in every ounce of sincerity he could. Harry nodded and took a breath to calm his nerves. "No, I'm sorry, Ernie, I shouldn't have said that either." He looked around, gaining some time and changed the subject. "So, is there something other than pumpkin juice to drink? I guess if you're raised on it you can get used to it after all, but tonight I'd rather have something I like." "Yeah, there's a jug of water down here, one sec." Ernie passed it along to a grateful Harry. Though Harry didn't know about it and likely wouldn't have cared if he did, the gossip that the Harry Potter hated pumpkin juice was around the school faster than he would have believed. For now, though, Harry and his friends were more intent on chatting to their new housemates and eating dinner. Justin's grimace at the cooking was almost matched by Harry's before he clamped down, again, on his reaction. While he was sure Justin and Hermione would understand, he didn't intend to cause more waves on his very first night. Instead, he limited himself to a brief boarding school food, right? For Justin's ears and ate slowly, apparently distracted by chatting with his fellow puffs. Having enjoyed food cooked by the kitsunes and even learned some of their culinary skills from his dad and mum, as well as eating with his friends over the years, Hogwarts food seemed to match the tradition of British boarding schools. When everyone was finished eating, Dumbledore again stood and the hall fell silent. Ahem, just a few more words now that we are all fed and watered. Harry noted the insult for later consideration. I have a few start of term notices to give you. First years should note that the forest on the ground is forbidden to all pupils. And a few of our older students would do well to remember that as well. Dumbledore's twinkling eyes flashed in the direction of a pair of grinning retards over at the Gryffindor table. I have also been asked by Mr. Filch, the caretaker, to remind you all that no magic should be used between classes in the corridors. Quidditch trials will be held in the second week of term. Anyone interested in playing for their house should contact Madam Hooch. And finally, I must tell you that this year, the third floor corridor on the right-hand side is out of bounds to everyone who does not wish to die a most painful death. Harry laughed until he noticed that none of the older students were treating it as the joke it ought to be. Great, a mystery to investigate on his very first night in the castle. Well, too, if he wanted to find out just why anyone thought pumpkin juice was a good idea. Still, investigations were just what the Shadow Clone were for originally, and he had 6 he could use at Hogwarts or more in an emergency. He made a note to talk to the others later. For now though, Dumbledore was speaking again. And now, before we go to bed, let us sing the school song. The other teacher's smiles almost disappeared here or became strained. Harry could have cried. This was one of the problems with having trained and developed his senses so much. People singing off-key. It quickly got worse when Dumbledore invited everyone to pick their favorite tune to which to sing the silly words. The fact that he appeared moved by the performance only added to the suffering. Not even the hearing protection techniques he had would save him. Dumbledore must be tone deaf, Harry decided, toying with thoughts of Taimum and Kinmum, expressing their displeasure to the man over a nice cup of tea and a full set of tools for making their baby boy sit through such a travesty of sound. Harry mouthed the words on automatic while he thought of how his friends at home were doing. Eventually the torture was over, those grinning idiots in Gryffindor being last to finish up with a funeral march, and they were sent off to bed by a disturbingly emotional headmaster. The fifth-year prefects came over and escorted the 10 new Hufflepuffs to the dorms, taking the time to point out various aspects of the castle on the way down into a lower level past the Hogwarts kitchens, suitable for a snack anytime, just tickle the pair. They were told, and from there to a corridor nearby. In a shadowy stone recess they were shown a pile of large barrels. The fifth-year boy waited until he got all their attention. Now while the other houses have passwords or for the Ravenclaws a riddle to guard their dorms, Hufflepuff set up something different for her house. The barrel 2 from the bottom, in the middle of this second row, here is special. If you tap it in the rhythm of Helga Hufflepuff like this, he demonstrated for the waiting students, it opens up into the tunnel that allows us to get inside. After you. Inside they found a rather cozy and welcoming space. Indeed, they somehow felt like the sun was shining on them. They also saw a squat little witch waiting for them with short gray, wavy hair. She gave them a smile as she looked them over. Welcome, my new first years, to your new house while you are here at Hogwarts. I am your head of house, Professor Sprout. I will also be teaching you herbology. If Professor McGonagall gave you her usual speech, then she told you that your house is something like your family while you are at Hogwarts. While the other houses may differ, in Hufflepuff we aim to support our new family and help each other with any troubles. You have been chosen because you are hardworking and loyal. Here you may find a warm welcome, especially those among you new to the wizarding world, and we will do what we can to help you find your place as you grow as witches and wizards, as students, and as people. She nodded to her prefects. These 2 will be available to answer questions if I am busy or just ask anyone. We are a friendly lot here. For now, though, why don't you all follow a prefect who will show you to your dorms. Your trunks have been brought in already and are waiting by your beds. Go through, unpack and settle in, and I'll see you again in the morning. The prefect split them into boys and girls, and Harry, Justin, Ernie and the 2 boys Harry didn't know yet followed. Harry was a little relieved, since even here he was getting extra looks, though they were generally friendly ones. So far it seemed Harry's guess was right, both about the house and about expectations. A quick introduction to his roommates Roger Malone and Wayne Hopkins, and they went to sleep. The next morning, Harry woke up at 6 a.m. as was his habit. He looked at his watch and saw he had about 10 minutes until his clones at home were due to dispel themselves. As he pulled back the curtains and started to get ready for the day, he was unsurprised to see the other boys were all still dead to the world. He smiled to himself, thinking they would be grateful he could be so quiet if they were awake to appreciate his courtesy. Silently he dressed in his running clothes and headed out through the empty common room to the castle proper. As he passed through shadows, he created a few shadow clones with orders to do a quick scout of the building to give him a map, creating replacements and dispelling themselves every 5 minutes where possible, until he had a basic layout of the castle clear in his head. Within 10 minutes, his clones had visited every floor. Within 20, they'd gotten thoroughly lost. The castle was big, to be sure, but the real issue was that the layout wasn't stable. Also, he was getting a weird headache from whichever clones had used any of the staircases that moved. After the backlash from those cleared, he immediately realized that it could be due to the clones being made of chakra and interacting with the magic that moved the staircases. After he created and dispelled a clone to spread that knowledge over the clones out exploring, they avoided touching any of the moving staircases, and that helped a great deal. There were still odd places, walls that looked like doors that looked part of the walls are hidden behind tapestries, and some of those felt uncomfortable to the clones. To test, however, Harry sought out the nearest moving staircase, riding it comfortably. It was only when he pressed his hand on the steps and actively ran chakra through it that he felt pain. Test complete. He thought. While inconvenient, it was certainly no hindrance that his clones couldn't really walk on the magical stairs. They were as comfortable as he was walking on the walls or ceiling, and he was sure they would soon find a way to act as if they were walking normally if need be. A full hour after he got up, Harry looked at his watch and headed up to take a shower. It was still early and if he was lucky, he should still get to have a long shower before he was forced to share. Unbidden, an image of a girl sharing the shower went through his mind and he cursed his early hormones. One long soothing shower later, Harry headed down to the Great Hall and sat down to breakfast at 20 minutes to 8. There were a scattering of students already there and more trickled in, most still drowsy as they took their places, eating up. Harry made sure to get a jug of milk for he and his friends to drink when they arrived, taking in a leisurely meal. By 10:02, all 10 of the Hufflepuffs in his year were seated around him and he noticed that the pumpkin juice wasn't near any of them. Professor Sprout had also noticed that they were all present and came over to give them each their timetables. As you can see, your first class is with me, so around 20 past 8 I'll take you over to Greenhouse 1, where we'll be taking all our herbology classes this year. Later this morning you have Defense Against the Dark Arts, followed immediately by lunch, and this afternoon is Transfiguration with Professor McGonagall, and dinner to follow at 6:30 tonight. Your curfew is at 9 sharp, which means you are to be in our common room or in your dorms by that time. Are there any questions? There were none, though everyone did have to go back to get their books, except for Hermione who was carrying all her books with her. Harry went back to the dorms with the rest, while Hermione took the chance to get in some reading instead. When everyone returned, Harry noted Hermione still had all the books there and offered to carry her bag for her, the same as he would for his girls at home. He didn't think that much of it, to him it was just obvious. Carrying kilos of books was a pain in the back if you didn't have the muscles for it, and he could tell that none of his fellow first years had them. Hermione gave him a shy smile and accepted, Harry slinging the bag easily over his shoulder and walked off next to her among the new puffs, all of them wondering what their classes would be like. The sun shining made the greenhouse sparkle as they approached, and when they got inside, the heat was almost stifling. The students were suddenly very glad they would never have classes here over the middle of summer. They sat in a semicircle around their head of house, who proceeded to show them various plants both magical and normal, and explained something of the properties of each, before passing around one of the safer plants in the curriculum, getting each of them to examine it and say what they noticed most about it, before she offered extra tips on things to look for and gave them a second variety to study. At the end of the lesson, the students were fairly happy, though for Wayne Hopkins, that could just have been the excuse to get dirty. They all trooped back into the castle, washing up before breaking up to go their own ways for the next hour. Hermione, naturally, wanted to check out the library, and it was almost a tie between Justin and Harry for second. Harry brought along both parchment and quill sets and a notebook, fountain pen, pencil and eraser, as well as a couple extra books. When he and Justin met up with Hermione in their common room, he saw with a smile that she'd added more books too, so he again offered to carry them for her. They found their way quickly with Harry leading, only making one wrong turn, thanks to the shifting passages. Harry was hopeful that eventually he would know enough of the changes that he could anticipate them before they happened. Maybe. Their first sight of the library was certainly designed to impress any true bibliophile. Shelves stretching into the distance, and thousands upon thousands of books old and new. Hermione guided them straight to the librarian, Madame Pince, asking her about the rules in the library. Her answer was crisp, almost forbidding, and conveyed a sense that Madame Pince actually viewed the books as her own personal treasures. While under other circumstances Harry might have found this amusing, he felt no temptation to laugh in front of the witch, let alone at her. The trio took a table, getting only one book each off the shelves for now as agreed, and enjoyed a rather quiet hour. That was when the silence was interrupted by a Ravenclaw boy and girl quietly arguing over the possession of a book on arithmancy. By the sound of it there was only one copy left and they both wanted it. When the boy won the remarkably quiet contest he walked off to read it in peace and the girl looked downcast. Harry marked his place in his book and got up, walking over to her. "Hello, I'm Harry Potter. I couldn't help hearing that you were looking for a particular book on arithmancy. What was it called?" he asked quietly. "Oh, arithmancy by the numbers. A beginner's guide," she replied, blushing a little. "I'm Padma Patil, by the way." "Well, Padma, I can understand why you'd want that book," he smiled softly. "I've brought my copy with me. If you like, you could read mine," Harry offered. Thank you." Harry smiled while wondering what he could do to help the others see him as Harry Potter, first-year student, rather than some sort of hero. He put it aside for now, as no matter what he chose to do, the problem would be with him for a while. The girls sat down next to Justin at their table and, after quiet and quick introductions, they returned to their reading for another half hour or so until it was time for them to pack up and prepare for their next class, Defense Against the Dark Arts. Sadly, that class was a letdown after their engaging introduction to herbology. The teacher had that ridiculous purple turban which he said was a gift, an obvious lie that unraveled as soon as Padma Patil asked for the story behind it. The odd smell from it was a further indication. The smell of decomposition, even masked by garlic and other scents, was strong enough Harry had to use one of the protective techniques his parents taught him against the foul odor. Quirinus Quirrell was the only person Harry had met in the school that stank of decomposition, and that alone was enough to get Harry suspicious. The man was someone to watch. Hermione wanted to return to the library, but Harry and Justin convinced her to come outside with them and read on the lawn, taking advantage of the blue skies. She and Justin were grateful for the picnic blanket Harry produced for them, and afterwards, Hermione admitted they were right, the fresh air and a good book were just what she needed after the lingering smells in the dotted classroom. They eventually wandered in for lunch, then took a walk around the grounds exploring and admiring the scenery and watching some older students buzzing about on brooms. Sticking close to Harry and Justin, Hermione started talking more with other first years they met on their explorations. Harry smiled openly at that. Like anyone he enjoyed being right, but more than that he was seeing Hermione opening up further and he loved being able to help his friends. By the time they went in as a group to Transfiguration, Hermione just handed Harry her bag and smiled at the in-joke. Harry took it with his own smile and led the way to the classroom. Professor McGonagall had her professional mask firmly in place as she started the lesson with a warning. "Transfiguration is some of the most complex and dangerous magic you will learn at Hogwarts," she began. "Anyone messing around in my class will leave and not come back. You have been warned." From there she displayed an impressive piece of magic, turning her desk into a pig and back again. With her class suitably excited, she got started with an introduction to Transfiguration, its power, its history, its role in the wizarding world. After a lot of note-taking, she handed out matches and instructed them to turn them into needles. This was the moment when Harry nearly came undone. He knew that magic and chakra didn't play well together, but he knew it as a product of the intellect. Harry's true lesson that day was a bone-deep awareness that there was something wrong with his spell casting. His every attempt caused pain to flow down his right arm, a feeling like he was burning his arm from the inside out. When he attempted to minimize the chakra flowing to his arm, that helped reduce the pain, the damage he could feel, but the feeling of magic went with it and he couldn't even get a spark out of his wand when he tried. He spent the rest of the lesson with his attention split even more than usual, fighting not to show the pain, as well as trying different ways to call up his magic without dragging along his chakra with it. He had ideas of what he would need to do, but the problem was finding one that worked. All he had to show for his efforts by the end of the lesson was a match that could almost be called silver if one squinted, a headache from the mental strain, and a way to get maybe 1/10 of his magic to respond while he kept his chakra mostly suppressed. Without further testing or help from his medic parents, there was little he could do. He did remember to praise Hermione when she earned praise from McGonagall for getting her match all silver and pointy. After class he ducked out to use a bathroom, taking the chance to perform a quick diagnostic technique, finding some minor damage that he was able to repair, feeling much better as he rejoined his friends, a term that he felt would come to encompass all 5 Puff girls and at least 2 of the boys. He would try to get to be friends or at least on polite terms with all of them, but he figured 7 of 9 would be good enough if it didn't work out that perfectly. Hermione headed off to the library again. She was feeling better about being around people her own age, but it was still an adjustment for her to have friends, so she was nervous about driving them off. Besides, all those books all in one place, how could she resist? Why should she? A quick goodbye to her friends and she was off with a smile. This left an open spot by Harry's side, however, and after some looks from the girls, Justin made way too, making Harry want to roll his eyes at all of it. On the other hand, it was a chance for him to get to know the others better and it wasn't like Justin was leaving. The next thing Harry knew, he had a girl on each arm. He shuddered inside at all the teasing he would get from his parents, though he had to smile back at each girl. The blonde girl on his left started them off. "Hi, I'm Hannah Abbott. Me and Susan Bones over there have been best friends for years. Would you be our friend too, Harry?" He had to give her credit, she was direct. "Of course, Hannah and Susan, I always like having more friends." He looked at the others to show he included them in the offer. "My only condition is that you want to be friends with me, Harry Potter, and not just with the boy who lived." Some of them looked a little confused, so he added. "The boy who lived is some character in books. None of the writers have ever even met me, much less interviewed me, not even for the supposed history books. They just made stuff up." He saw some doubt still there, so another try. "Okay, Hannah, you wouldn't want to be treated as if you were really someone else, like say Professor McGonagall. She's smart, respected and someone well known. But she's not me." Hannah smiled. "I get it. Okay, Harry, I'm happy to be your friend." She was quickly echoed by the rest, and Harry gave them a big smile, relieved that at least here he could find people who may see him for himself. Well, he amended, see the Harry that was just a normal boy. Whether he would ever get to let them see everything else was something he couldn't decide anytime soon, sadly. So much of it wasn't his secret to share. The secrets that were his alone were really just about the Dursleys, and he would rather just forget all about them, since he couldn't afford to kill them for what they did to an innocent child. He knew he would have to tell his friends eventually, but the thought was unpleasant to say the least. Susan spoke up at last, that settled, then. "Now let's head to the Great Hall. I'm hungry." She kept her arm linked with Harry's, and between them she and Hannah dragged their new friend possession to the hall. Harry did remember to ask Justin if he could check on Hermione and invite her to dinner with the rest of them, a way to make sure she didn't skip meals for the sake of reading, something he was afraid she might easily do now that she had a big new library to explore. Justin laughed, "I can see you're tied up, Harry, sure I'll grab a quick bite to take with me on the long, arduous journey." Harry entered the Great Hall, still trapped between the two girls and felt like laughing himself, both out of relief at getting some progress on having people treat him as Harry and also at the image he was making. The boy hero dragged between two girls. He would have to remember to create more jokes in future so he didn't get too wound up. He also wondered if Hogwarts would have any movies to watch since they would be stuck in the castle or the grounds for the next 3 months. Failing that, he would have to see about other ways to pass the time. Not everyone would be as thrilled as his Hermione to have only a library for inspiration and relaxation. Harry covered the sudden smile with a bite of his roast. Hermione wouldn't be the only puff to spend lots of time in there. He just knew his family would love to read that library, and with the muggle-repelling wards around the whole grounds, the only way they would get a chance was for him to copy the books there and send the copies home. He should also spend more time with Cesarina and Miyuki. A flutter caught his attention just as his snowy owl entered the hall, zooming down to his shoulder. She preened as she instantly became the center of attention, accepting caresses from the mostly girls that crowded around them, before rubbing her head against his cheek and looking in his eyes. He smiled ruefully. "Yes, girl, I should spend more time with you, you're such a beautiful owl, aren't you?" Miyuki clacked her beak and nodded, then settled on his shoulder, satisfied that her place at the top of the pecking order was secured. Harry then spent a few minutes showing Miyuki off to everyone, something he knew she enjoyed, before writing a quick note and tying it around her proffered leg. "Would you take this to my parents, Miyuki? Oh, and the note asks them to give you a proper feed when you get there. I know you've missed your Bacony goodness." With a quick nod, Miyuki was off out of there again. No sooner was she gone than Cesarina hopped up onto his lap, looking at him with a clear look that said, "Feed me, now." Cutting up strips of meat for the tiger-striped cat, he fed her, much to the amusement of those watching, as he kept up conversation with his friends. A quick signal and Cesarina got up carefully, making her rounds of the hall. By the time she returned, Hermione had been retrieved from the library by Justin and took a seat opposite Harry, cooing at the beautiful feline who promptly abandoned Harry and occupied Hermione's lap, cadging extra food from the girl. Over dinner, the group talked about their lessons, their teachers, the other students, and also their home lives. After dinner, he took a second to tell his clones to dispel, providing him a more developed map of the castle and the grounds. 3 replacements were now sent to start investigating anything interesting, one would read further through the books, one watching his back, and one keeping a general eye out around him. They chatted until it was time to head back before curfew, with most of them chatting more, keeping the noise down, so those reading wouldn't be disturbed. Another peaceful night's sleep and Harry was up at 6 a.m. again, going for his morning run and headed down to breakfast where the students again trickled in. After eating and heading off to class, another run down to the greenhouses for herbology, he started his lessons for the day. In the hour break before History of Magic, Hermione had to be calmed down again. She had become very excited about being taught by an actual ghost. Sadly, the class was a failure, as the ghost of Professor Binns droned on and on while they took notes and got Emeric the evil and Uric the oddball mixed up. Hermione demanded some time with Caesarina after that disappointment, though he caught her smile. After lunch, it was time for their first charms class with the head of Ravenclaw, Professor Flitwick. He was a tiny wizard who had to stand on a pile of books to see over his desk. Harry wondered why he didn't use something else, but perhaps it was his way of joking about his height, or maybe it was something he did to make people underestimate him. When he reached Harry's name during roll call, Harry caught him faking an excited squeak before he allowed himself to topple off the desk. Harry noted that there was no sound of his fall and nodded mentally. It was a ruse, and it did help to make his class more friendly. Wednesday was much the same, their last herbology and transfiguration classes for the week and astronomy at midnight up at the top of the astronomy tower. Their teacher, Professor Sinistra, had an engaging style and brought her subject to life, despite the tired students, but it was obvious that she was limited by inferior equipment. And while interesting in its own right, they couldn't see a relevance between the subject and anything else they needed to learn, nor were they told of practical applications. Harry held out hope, after it was early days, even at midnight, to be calling the subject useless or outdated. She did question him closely about his telescope, a modern one he got from a specialist shop in London, on the Muggle side as his professor put it. Sakura Mum had raved about this model to the rest of the family, and when they saw that he was required to bring his own telescope to Hogwarts, she made the sacrifice of her very own one. She said she would just buy the next model when it came out, something Harry didn't doubt for a minute. Thursday all the first-year claws and puffs were tired, even Harry, though that didn't stop him waking up for his regular run. Thankfully their first class was history at 10:30. Harry made a bet with Justin the night before that someone would fall asleep in class and that the professor wouldn't even notice. That would be followed by Dada, then lunch and their second charms class. Well, one good class out of 3, at least, he thought. For what was supposed to be a great school of magic, Harry was distinctly unimpressed, and he had heard that their last subject, potions, could be even worse as the teacher hated teaching. These musings fled his mind as one of his clones popped itself, and he slipped out of sight heading towards an ugly scene. Over near the Slytherin dungeons, a clone had seen 3 boys following a red-headed girl. When he identified the 3 boys as Draco Malfoy and his guards, a sadistic expression adorning the arrogant blonde's face, he dispelled to get the boss, as his shadow clones called the real Harry, to the scene to handle it. The girl, Daphne he remembered, was backed up against a stone wall, the door she thought to use turning out to be another fake. Before her, 3 fellow Slytherins tried to loom over her. Since she was inches taller than any of them, it wasn't working too well, so then they crowded her. That Ponce Malfoy was lecturing her about better families and how those from poor Swedish roots ought to recognize their betters. He was just about to boast for the 5th time of his family's wealth and power when he and his goons lost their balance, falling painfully to the sticky stone floor, face down and now stuck. She looked behind them and saw the Harry Potter with a fixed neutral expression on his face. The owner of those green eyes walked over calmly, offered her a hand and guided her away, blocking her view of the now humiliated trio. Once she was away and out of danger, he gave a short bow and disappeared around a corner. The sticky capture field technique he used vanished, leaving only the 3 boys now stuck to each other in a compromising position. Harry had to walk quickly to make it to his first class, but overall he was pleased with himself. He had stopped the incident before it went too far, he had saved the girl, and he had managed to refrain from beating those fools to within an inch of their lives. While satisfying at the time, he knew he didn't want to go that far for something that likely wasn't even a crime, yet. Besides, the consequences for doing that he didn't even know, which would have made it extremely foolish. Still, he did feel good about what he had done. He got through his classes, not even mentioning the confrontation to his friends, since he didn't yet have an explanation for how he got there. Harry decided that Murphy must have been watching him because things did not go according to his plan. Later that day, Harry was tracked down by the elder cousin Mark Wilkinson, who bowed slightly to him, saying he felt he owed Harry for helping out Daphne when he had no need. Harry pondered briefly and asked Mark if he would mind hearing Harry out. Normally, I'd just tell you that you don't owe me anything for that. However, this isn't the same society I grew up in. I mean, I've not even been here a week and that's glaringly obvious to me. As such, I'll exercise some caution and indulge in some Ravenclaw curiosity. He took a breath and looked seriously up at the 4th-year Slytherin. I don't intend any insult to you, to Daphne or your family, so if that means you owe me, then I would consider the debt paid if you could help arrange lessons in your culture. If it's a more informal thing, a thank you for helping family, well, truly, your thanks aren't needed, I was happy to help her out against bullies. If that gets me another friend or 2, then that's the icing on the cake. The older boy was taken aback, this was not at all what he'd expected from the boy who lived, and especially the way he identified the wizarding world as foreign. Still, it was certainly apparent that he was trying to settle in. The serious way he took the situation was a pleasant surprise, Mark decided, as was the offer of friendship both to him and to his cute little cousin Daphne. If cultivated, that could certainly help him in his career prospects and help restore the family fortunes, something they needed as the last half-century had been costly both in blood and money, what with the reduced sales that a smaller population imposed on their businesses. Not that Mark knew all of that history just yet, only that the family had had to cut back on certain expenses and then again in his own childhood. The lavish balls and parties of his parents' youth were unavailable to his generation, something he was starting to really miss, given how it was hurting his dating prospects, as his teenage hormones were reminding him hourly. Coming out of his thoughts, he allowed his smile to show and offered his hand to Harry. "You know, Potter, I believe I'd like another friend. And I can see that you aren't like I expected." Harry smiled back up at Mark as he shook hands with the older boy. They discussed a few minor matters, helping to break the ice, before heading their separate ways. Mark later that night let Daphne know of Harry's offer of friendship, an opportunity she seized the following day at breakfast. His practice spellcasting that evening showed some progress too, he was able to cast his first successful spell, but the pain was intense. He wouldn't call it a success until he could cast without such a crippling distraction. The nerve damage was more than a little worrying too, though his clones healed that within a minute. As long as he stayed on top of it, especially if his parents could find a solution, the damage shouldn't become a long-term problem. He'd get the clones at home to let them know in the next day or two. After all, the damage was being healed and they couldn't visit him soon enough for the delay to matter, and it was a secure way to pass on message. Maybe that would work for my little copying project. What if Naruto returns with a harem? Harry Potter end here, and thanks for watching my video till the end.